Chapter 1175. For example, at this moment, the vine in front of Qin Yu was crazily lashing at the ground. Its main body was hidden deep underground, and it was unknown how big it was. Just the part that came out of the ground to attack Qin Yu was enough to blot out the sky. The dark purple vine was incomparably tough. After he cut it off, the mucus it sprayed out immediately emitted billowing white smoke when it came into contact with the air. This white smoke was extremely poisonous and had a terrifying corrosive property. Qin Yu had to expend a great deal of strength in order to get rid of this vine. As for killing it, it wasn't that he couldn't do it. But this thing clearly had an exuberant life force, and its main body was buried deep underground. It was unknown how much time it would take to kill it. He could sense that Yun She, Yun Shi, and the others' auras were even further away than before. They were clearly moving quickly. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu's expression became increasingly solemn. Even with his strength, he couldn't catch up to them in this secret realm. Either Yun She, Yun Shi, and the others were lucky, or they had taken the arranged path and avoided most of the dangers. Even an idiot would know which was more likely. Qin Yu took a deep breath, faintly regretting his carelessness. He already knew that there was something wrong with those two women. If he let Yun She and Yun Shi get hurt, he wouldn't be able to rest easy. But it was too late for regret. All Qin Yu could do was catch up to them as fast as he could. He hoped that those two women wouldn't make a move too early. Schwa. Qin Yu's speed increased, leaving behind an afterimage in the air as he chased after the two's auras. Their journey was smooth. This was the truest feeling of all the members of the two teams that had gathered together after entering the secret realm. Although they had encountered some attacks, the intensity was very low. Everyone worked together to easily resolve them. His natural cautiousness caused Yun She to frown inwardly. He had always felt that this secret realm was acting too strangely. He had heard more than once about the dangers of high-ranked secret realms before entering the Endless Sea. Compared to this, the difference was too great. Were they really lucky? Taking a deep breath, Yun She raised his head to look at the front of the team. Coincidentally, Yao Ling turned her head, and their eyes met in midair. Yao Ling was her name. No matter what others thought, in Yun She's eyes, it was very beautiful, so beautiful that it made his heart beat faster. This was the first time in his life. Yun She tried to control his mind, but he still couldn't help but be attracted to her. Perhaps what that last Yunshi said was right. This was the so-called fate. As if she had sensed Yun She's uneasiness and hesitation, ringing bell blinked her eyes, revealing a bit of doubt. Yun She coughed and shook his head with a smile. He inwardly thought that he must have been overthinking things. Yao Ling had also said before that she had a keen sense for dangerous auras. Now, with her leading the way, it was possible for them to avoid most of the dangers. As for why Yao Ling had met with danger when he had saved her, cough, cough, Yun She could no longer think of that much. Love could muddle a person's mind, and this point was once again proven by Yun She. Half a day later, Yao Ling stopped and looked at the valley at the end of her line of sight. Her face lit up with joy. She turned around and said, "This is the place that the aura is pointing to. My perception tells me that there must be treasures inside." Yinshi walked up to the front and stared at the mist above the valley hesitantly. "Really? Why do I feel that this valley is a little scary?" Yunshi glanced at his little sister and pondered for a moment. Then he said, "It's never wrong to be more cautious. Let's first investigate the situation in the valley before we make our decision." Yao Ling felt wronged, but still nodded. Brother Yun is right. There's no harm in being careful. She lowered her head. Yunshi felt sorry for her, but couldn't say anything. He could only pretend that he didn't see it and turn around. "Zhou Cheng, your movement is the fastest, and you can escape if there's a problem. How about you go and investigate?" Zhou Cheng nodded obediently. In another group, a few people whispered to each other. A woman walked out. "I will go with fellow Taoist, Zhou Cheng. Let's go." Having made a decision, the two did not delay any longer. Their figures turned into shadows and ran towards the valley ahead. They quickly disappeared into the mist. A moment later, Zhou Cheng and the woman returned. Although they looked a little disheveled, their faces were filled with unconcealable joy. Brother Yun, after we entered the valley, we found a dazzling golden plant with golden fruits on it. Although we couldn't get close, the fragrance of the fruits made me feel 100 times more spirited just by smelling it. The woman said calmly, "The golden fruit tree has a guardian demon that is very strong. But if we work together, we should be able to deal with it." Yunche looked at Zhou Cheng. Zhou Cheng nodded seriously. Fellow Taoist Zhang Ying is right. If we work together, there shouldn't be a problem. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. From the results of the investigation, Yao Ling's judgment was correct. Yunche said apologetically, "Fellow Taoist Yao Ling, it's not that I don't trust you, but the land of chaos secret realm is dangerous and strange." Yao Ling shook her head. "Brother Yun, there's no need to say anything. I understand." She glanced at him and smiled again. "Now we should hurry. After all, we aren't the only ones who entered the secret realm. We might be discovered by others." No one had any objections. After a bit of preparation, they headed straight for the valley. Yinshi frowned slightly. Her gaze fell on Yao Ling. It wasn't that she was suspicious, but she did have a bad feeling. Her shoulder was patted. She turned to look at her brother. After a moment of hesitation, she said softly, "I still feel that it's dangerous." Yinche said, "It might be because of the secret realm itself that your perception has become more sensitive. Don't worry too much." After thinking for a while, he continued, "Later, just stay by my side. Just be a little more careful." Yinshi nodded. A moment later, the valley appeared in front of them. After everyone entered, they quickly saw the golden fruit tree that Zhou Cheng and Zhang Ying had mentioned. It was very tall, and its crown covered a large area. Its branches and leaves seemed to be made of pure gold, dazzling to the eyes. Round and plump fruits hung between the branches and leaves. They were also golden but shone brighter, like little golden suns. It smelled good. When he took a deep breath, he could clearly feel his heartbeat suddenly quicken, and his spirit abruptly became excited. Everyone's eyes lit up as they stepped into the valley. Zhou Huan licked the corner of his mouth. "What are you waiting for?" At this moment, a loud noise came from outside the valley. Although it was some distance away, it was loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. The expressions of the two teams who were about to make a move changed. Not good. Someone else had come. Immediately, several dissatisfied gazes fell on Yunche. If he wasn't meddlesome, they would have sent people to investigate. Now, the matter was almost over. Now, before they could do anything, someone else had arrived. Yunche's complexion wasn't too good. He could feel the gazes that fell on him, and he felt helpless and depressed. Zhou Cheng said, "Brother Yun can't be blamed for this." Yunche raised a hand to interrupt him. "I was too cautious and missed a good opportunity. But in the current situation, we can only wait. If the other party was just passing by, that would be for the best. But if they were coming for this valley like them, then they would have to think about it." The leader of the other team nodded calmly. He didn't say anything. Yunche's proposal was indeed the best choice. Shoo! The sound of breaking air came. This time, it was very close. The faces of everyone in the valley darkened. The other party had already arrived outside the valley. The possibility of them just passing by was minuscule. But what puzzled them was that from the sound, there seemed to be only one person. Was he scouting ahead, or was there a companion hidden in the shadows? Before they could think further, a calm voice came from outside the valley. "Yunche, Yunshi, if you are in the valley, please show yourself." "Ah." Yunshi's eyes widened, and he subconsciously rushed out. Yunche didn't manage to hold him back and immediately followed. And then his little sister was bouncing up and down, a brilliant smile on her face. She pulled on Qinyu and asked, "How did you know I was here?" Qinyu let out a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "I just happened to be nearby. I sense your aura, so I came to take a look." Yunche's eyes were deep. He looked at Qinyu several times. In this mystic realm, there was an invisible suppression that limited the range of one's divine sense. But Qinyu said that he had sensed their auras. Either his soul was far stronger than everyone else's, or he was lying. Even though Qinyu hadn't fought much since they met, Yunshe still had some understanding of the level of his cultivation. Yunshe didn't believe that Qin Yu's soul cultivation was so formidable. In other words, there was a high chance that Qin Yu was lying. Thinking of this, Yunshe stiffened. He immediately smiled and said, "Brother Qin, you and I are truly fated to meet here." As he spoke, he glared at Master Yin. "How old are you already? Why are you still acting so crazy? Hurry up and let go of fellow Taoist Qin." Master Yin didn't notice the change in her brother's attitude. She grabbed onto Qin Yu even harder. She humphed and said, "This fellow ate a great deal of good food for me along the way, but he left just like that. This time, I can't let him run away so easily." Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He thought that this little girl, if it weren't for the protection of a meticulous elder brother, she would have already been sold off by others. He glanced at Yunshe and calmly withdrew his hand. "Fellow Taoist, Yunshe is right. You and I are indeed fated to meet." Then, Qin Yu faintly smiled. His eyes fell on the people that followed him out of the mountain valley. "But today, it isn't just you who are fated to meet me." The complexions of the two women changed, because it was obvious that Qin Yu was looking at them when he said these words. Yunshe frowned. "What does fellow Taoist Qin mean?" Qin Yu lightly said, "Not too long ago, I inadvertently encountered these two women fighting over a treasure. I don't know if it's because they've lost their memories or because of some other reason, but they don't recognize each other anymore." He paused. "Fellow Taoist Yunshe, what do you think is going on?" As he spoke, Qin Yu's finger moved between Yao Ling and Zhang Ying. The complexions of the people outside the mountain valley changed. If this was true, then there were far too many things that could be explained. Zhang Ying's pupil shrank. She saw Qin Yu's expression change. Just this change in expression was enough to prove that Qin Yu wasn't lying. It was actually true. Yunshe's face darkened. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He didn't think that this woman would reveal a flaw so easily. But from what he saw before, their acting skills were superb. This was a bit strange. Reality proved that Qin Yu's thoughts weren't wrong. Zhang Ying revealed an apologetic expression. "That's right. Yao Ling and I are old acquaintances. We even had some grudges before, and not too long ago, we fought over a treasure." Speaking to her, she revealed a bitter expression. "But in the end, that thing was taken away by fellow Taoist Qin, wasn't it?" Yao Ling's face paled. She nervously looked at Yunshe. "Big brother Yin, I didn't mean it. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid that I would make you unhappy. After all, I'm not strong, and I only joined halfway. I was afraid that you would think of me as a burden." Zhang Ying said, "My worries were similar to Yao Ling's. Afterwards, the two of us discussed in private. We didn't want to expose the fact that we knew each other so that no one would have any unnecessary suspicions." Pausing, she looked at Yao Ling apologetically. "I told this matter to fellow Taoist Lian Feng. He can testify." As the leader of the group, Lian Feng looked at everyone and nodded. He said in a low voice, "That's right, fellow Taoist Zhang Ying explained this to me. In order to prevent everyone from suspecting each other, I agreed with her actions." Yao Ling's face paled. "Big brother Yin, I'm really sorry. I wanted to explain it to you after everyone's separated." Qin Yu's eyes swept over Yunshe's changing expression. He frowned. Things had developed beyond his expectations, and he seemed to have fallen into a trap. This was going to be troublesome. Chapter 1176. As expected, Zhang Ying made her move. This woman's words were sharp. We have already explained what fellow Taoist Qin Yu said. Although there were some parts that were wrong, we had no other intentions. After a brief pause, her tone became a bit heavier. "But fellow Taoist Qin Yu, perhaps you should explain why you are here?" Qin Yu lightly said, "As I said before, I sensed Yunshe and Yunshi's aura, so I rushed over to warn you. But looking at the current situation, it seems that I was overthinking things." Zhang Ying said, "Sensed aura? It seems that fellow Taoist Qin Yu's strength far surpasses our imagination. After all, in this mystic realm, our range of perception is extremely limited." She took a deep breath. "But there is one thing I want to know. That day we hurriedly parted ways. Did fellow Taoist Qin you remember my aura and Yaoling's? Or did you already discover us? So why did you jump out to warn us? Qin Yu was silent. After determining that he had been tricked, he knew he couldn't explain himself, but there was nothing to explain. Ignoring Zhang Ying's question, he looked at the mountain valley in front of him and said, "This place isn't good. It is best if you don't enter. Of course, this is only a warning. Whether you want to listen or not is up to you." Yun Che said, "Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, do you not want to explain?" Qin Yu looked at him and shook his head. "Your emotions have already affected your thoughts and judgment. Explaining is useless. That is all I have to say. Everyone, take care." He looked at Yin Shi. "Be careful. I'm leaving." Before Yin Shi could speak, Zhou Huan sneered. "You come and go as you please. Qin Yu, do you really think we can't do anything to you?" He stepped forward, his aura surging. But at this time, Qin Yu suddenly looked at him. This glance was like a bucket of cold water pouring over his head, causing his entire body to go cold and his heartbeat to nearly stop. The complexions of the surrounding people changed. Without pausing, Qin Yu took several steps forward and vanished from sight. A long time after he left, Zhou Huan let out a deep breath. He gasped for breath, his face pale and angry. He wanted to say something to redeem his face. His lips moved several times, but no sound came out. He didn't know why, but Qin Yu's eyes kept appearing in his mind. Then, he couldn't help but feel fear and awe in his heart. Qin Yu left, but the atmosphere between the two teams changed a little. The valley was right in front of them, and they had already seen the golden fruit tree with their own eyes. Since they were unwilling to give up, they could only enter again. Everyone could clearly feel each other's cautious attitude. Intentionally or unintentionally, he widened the distance between him and Ringing Bell and Zhang Ying. "Big brother Yun," Yao Ling said bitterly. Yin Che revealed a smile. "It's fine. Even if there's a misunderstanding, it's fine as long as it's cleared up." He nudged Master Yun. "Ah, that's right. My brother is right. Everyone won't really mind. Don't worry, big sister Ringing Bell." She leaned over and held her hand, comforting her in a low voice. Looking at Yao Ling's pitiful and reddened eyes, Yin Shi couldn't help but feel a little pity for her. But her mind, she kept thinking about Qin Yu's attitude towards her and Zhang Ying. Although Qin Yu hadn't given any explanation, he had warned Yao Ling and Zhang Ying to be careful even before he left. It was clear that he was still suspicious of them. For some reason, as Yin Shi held Yao Ling's hand, she suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of her heart. The golden fruit tree had a guardian demon. It was similar to what Zhou Cheng and Zhang Ying had said. It wasn't too difficult for them to deal with it together. Even though they split some of their strength to deal with the trouble that might arise from Qin Yu's arrival, they still managed to clean it up after a while. The valley quieted down. Lian Feng opened his eyes and pointed a finger at the air. A phantom formation appeared and melted into the air. "All right, the formation is complete. Even if someone wants to break into the valley, they should be able to hold them off for a while." Everyone's expressions relaxed. Their eyes focused on the golden fruit tree. It seemed harmless, but they didn't dare to be careless. After all, it wasn't just guardian demons that could kill people in the secret realm. There were some plants that were even more terrifying. Yin Che said in a low voice, "Everyone be careful." The two teams had a total of 10 people, and each team was composed of 5 cultivators. This was also the reason why the two sides were able to work together. Their strength was similar, so it would reduce a lot of suspicion and trouble. As the leaders of the teams, Yun Che and Lian Feng were naturally the strongest. At least, that was how it seemed on the surface. The two stood at the front. Behind them were Zhou Huan and Zhou Cheng. Yao Ling and Zhang Ying were also among them. Yin Shi was relatively at the back. Because of Yun Che and Zhou Huan's and Zhou Cheng's attitude, Yin Shi was placed at the back of the group. Of course, Yin Shi was the weakest. If he was placed at another position, it could affect the safety of the entire team. The 10 people worked together and carefully approached the golden fruit tree. Lian Feng held a treasure in his hand that looked like an ocarina. According to him, it could detect auras and give warnings. The journey was smooth. The ocarina never made a sound. Now that the 10 people were close to the golden fruit tree, the sweet smell of the fruit was even stronger. Unconsciously, everyone's breathing deepened and their eyes shone with urgency. The treasure was right in front of them, and it didn't seem dangerous, so it was normal for them to have such an emotional reaction. Even a cautious Yun Che didn't notice anything wrong. After carefully sensing for a long time, he nodded towards Lien Feng. Although Qin Yu said that his thoughts and judgment were affected by his emotions, the truth was that Yun Che was still very careful. He didn't completely believe in Lien Feng or the ocarina flute-shaped treasure in his hand. Only after he determined that there was nothing wrong did he relax a little. Walala, a gust of wind blew past, ruffling the leaves of the golden fruit tree. As the leaves rubbed against each other, they emitted a metallic sound. But right now, no one had the mind to pay attention to this. This was because as the wind blew past, the fruity smell became even richer. An intense desire surged out from the depths of their hearts. Although they didn't know what effects this golden fruit had, no one doubted its preciousness. But no one doubted its preciousness at all, because just by smelling it, the strength in their bodies had increased by a tiny bit. A cultivator in Lien Feng's team gulped. Everyone, what are we waiting for? The treasure is right in front of us. If we delay, something unexpected will happen. Yinche took a deep breath. Before we determine its effects, it is best not to rashly eat the fruit. Let's work together to pick the fruit and divide it up. How about it? Lien Feng nodded. Brother Yun is wise. I have no objections. Everyone nodded. After reaching an agreement, they no longer hesitated. They scattered and flew towards the fruit tree. The fragrance became even stronger. Gulp. Master Yun swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he looked at the golden fruit in his hand. He wondered what it tasted like. She really wanted to taste it. As soon as this thought appeared, Yin sure suppressed it. But soon, she discovered that the more she tried to suppress it, the stronger the impulse in her heart became. She took a deep breath and bit her lips. Her thoughts became even more intense. Eat it. It is already yours. If it smelled so good, it would definitely taste wonderful, and it would also be helpful to one's cultivation. If she secretly ate one, no one would notice. Moreover, her brother was one of the leaders of the team, and Zhou Huan and Zhou Qing both liked her, so it wouldn't matter even if others saw her. The fruit was slowly brought to her mouth. The closer it was, the more enticing it became. Yunshi licked her lips, her saliva glistening. Yunshi, what are you doing? The fruit was suddenly snatched away. Yunshi looked up. Brother, Yunshi's complexion was ugly. Didn't I say that before we determine its effects, we cannot eat it? He turned his hand and put away the fruit. He glanced at Yunshi. Step back. The fruit fragrance is too strong. You might not be able to bear it. Yunshi wanted to refute, but Yao Ling walked over. Listen to Big Brother Yun. I will accompany you. After saying that, he pulled her along and walked out. Lien Feng suddenly said, This fruit fragrance is a bit strange. I suggest we not continue picking it. Let's determine its effects first. Not picking it? Why not? This is a treasure we found with great difficulty. Are we going to leave it to others? Zhou Huan stared at the remaining half of the golden fruit and roared. Yun Che frowned. But at this moment, his complexion changed. No, there is one person missing. Everyone was shocked and quickly scanned their surroundings. As expected, there were only 9 people left in front of them. The one missing was the other woman in Lien Feng's group, besides Zhang Ying. She was here just now. I remember it clearly. The cultivator that approached this woman had an ugly complexion. He anxiously looked around. Lien Feng shushed them. Don't speak. Listen. Everyone quieted down. Then, they heard a light crunching sound. The moment they heard this sound, the image of someone biting into a juicy fruit and chewing it in their mouths appeared in everyone's minds. Crunch! There was another sound. This time, everyone locked onto the source of the sound. They looked up at the same time. It was there. Zhou Huan clenched his teeth. She is stealing it. Lien Feng's complexion was ugly. After all, everyone had agreed that they would all pick the fruit before dividing it. But the person beside him had broken the rules. Everyone, rest assured, no matter how many fruits you eat, I guarantee that I will take double the amount. I will not miss out on your share." As he spoke, he stepped forward and howled through the leaves. "I will go and grab her." This method of handling things was quite satisfactory. After eating one fruit, two were taken away as punishment. After dividing it up, everyone had obtained a bargain. But at this time, there was a miserable scream. Lien Feng, who had rushed into the thick leaves above them, tumbled down. He fell to the ground and wildly rolled about, screaming again and again. Traces of black energy constantly emitted from his body, corroding his flesh and blood. The scene was extremely bloody. The sudden turn of events caused everyone's expressions to change greatly. Before they could react, a black shadow pounced down. "Fruit! Give me your fruit!" A sharp and grating voice rang out. Looking at her clothes, the black shadow was the woman who had stolen and eaten the fruit. But now, she was completely unrecognizable. Red hair pierced through her skin and grew densely, enveloping her entire body. Her face was distorted, and her facial features were hideous. She looked like a devil from hell. And what was most terrifying was that as she roared, her mouth was still chewing. Blood splashed out. It was actually a piece of fresh meat. Looking at Lien Feng, who was rolling about on the ground in increasing pain, the source was obvious. Yin Che roared out, "Be careful." He punched out. Bang! The red-haired woman was forced back, but she only paused for a moment before rushing out again, without any signs of injury. "Let's retreat first." Two cultivators rushed out to grab Lien Feng. Everyone rapidly retreated, but the red-haired woman madly chased after them. Even though she was forced back again and again, she was still alive and kicking. "Fruit! It's because of the fruit." Yun Che waved his hand and threw away all the golden fruits he had picked. The red-haired woman didn't chase after them. She rushed up to pick up the fruits and ate them clean. As she continued to eat the fruits, the woman let out a painful yet joyful roar. Amidst the crackling sounds of her bones and flesh, her body swelled up again and again. Her skin couldn't bear it anymore and cracked, revealing her scarlet flesh and blood gushed out. But at this time, even more red hair drilled out from her flesh and blood, sucking up all the blood. As expected, this woman's change was because of these golden fruits. Seeing this with her own eyes, Master Yun paled. If it weren't for Yin Che stopping her just now, she feared she would have become like this. She opened her mouth to say something, but discovered that she couldn't move. She couldn't even speak a single word. Her eyes widened in panic. She turned to look at the bell beside her and gave it a charming smile. But there was no emotion in her eyes, as cold as an empty shell. "Throw away the fruits. Throw them all away." She could clearly hear Yin Che's roars in her ears. Master Yin desperately struggled, but to no avail. Chapter 1177. A thought flashed through her mind. Qingyu was right. There was indeed a problem with Yao Ling. Since there was a problem with her, then Zhang Ying was definitely in cahoots with her. Yun Shi's eyes widened because she saw Zhang Ying appear behind Yin Che. She wanted to harm her big brother. His heartbeat quickened, and he seemed to hear a light kacha sound in his ears, as if something in his body had shattered. "Big brother, be careful." Yun Shi screamed with all her strength. Then, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her exposed skin turned red. It was like a raging flame had been ignited in her body. The blood that fell to the ground actually began to burn as it came into contact with the air. The temperature in the air rapidly rose. Yin Che's complexion changed. He moved to avoid the sneak attack from behind. Seeing that her attack had failed, Zhang Ying retreated. She frowned and grabbed Yin Shi's bell. Fire-bathing lineage. Yao Ling was a bit surprised and then happy. Yin Che's eyes flashed with disbelief. He clenched his teeth and said, "There really is a problem with you." As he spoke, he stared at Yao Ling. Yin Shi was in her hands. Hearing this, Yao Ling chuckled. "Big brother Yun, the truth is that I quite like you, but I have no other choice." Their original plan wasn't like this, but Qin Yu's appearance had forced them to act ahead of time. Luckily, things had gone smoothly so far. Moreover, Yin Shi was actually from the fire-bathing lineage. This was an unexpected surprise. Yin Che didn't have time to regret. He coldly said, "Let go of Yin Shi, and I will give you two a chance to live." Besides the injured Lien Feng and the red-furred woman, there were still 5 of them. Even if Yao Ling and Zhang Ying hid their strength, they still weren't their match. Thinking of this, Yin Che's heart ached, and he felt endless gratitude towards Qin Yu. If it weren't for him suddenly appearing and messing up the 2 women's plans, they really would have been in danger. 5 against 2, you did have the absolute advantage. Yao Ling's lips curled up. But now, I'm afraid that is no longer the case. Yin Che was startled. Before he could respond, 2 miserable screams sounded out. The 2 people supporting Lien Feng had their chests torn apart and their organs fell to the ground. Their eyes widened and blood gushed out from their noses and mouths. Lien Feng, who was badly mutilated and had a sinister appearance, did not seem to feel any pain from his injuries. His voice was indifferent. "Don't waste time. Finish them off quickly." As he spoke, a piece of rotten flesh on his face fell to the ground. The cultivator whose chest had been torn open hadn't died yet. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Senior apprentice brother Lien Feng, Lien Feng said he died a long time ago, but it doesn't matter, you two will be together very soon." The red-haired woman, who had eaten the golden fruit, was attracted by the smell of blood and pounced on the 2 corpses, tearing them apart. The scene was bloody and horrifying. Upon seeing this scene, Yin Che, Zhou Huan, and Zhou Cheng, who were still alive, felt as if they had fallen into an icy cavern as a chill spread from the bottom of their hearts. It was obvious that coming to the valley was a conspiracy from the very beginning. Lien Feng said, "Have you thought it through? That's fine. Then I'll send you all on your way." He let out a sharp howl. The red-haired woman, who was tearing apart the 2 corpses, suddenly raised her head and stared at Yin Che and the others. Bang! The ground was torn apart by the sharp claws of her hands and feet. The red-haired woman howled as she hurtled towards Yin Che and the others. After eating a massive number of golden fruits and a great deal of flesh and blood, the red-haired woman's body had become even larger. She was just like a red-haired monster. But contrary to her massive body, her speed wasn't affected at all. Instead, she was even faster and more agile than before. Her sharp claws clawed at Yin Che, tearing apart the air and emitting piercing sounds. 3 against 1, they could only barely maintain a balance. None of their attacks could cause any serious damage to the red-haired monster. Yin Che's complexion became increasingly ugly. At some unknown time, there was also the monster that had replaced Lien Feng, Yao Ling, and Zhang Ying, glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Today was likely going to be dangerous. Glancing at his little sister who was caught by Yao Ling, Yin Che clenched his teeth. He suddenly lifted his hand and threw out a token. Bang! As this token touched the air, it began to burn, turning into an incomparably massive flame rune that shot into the sky. The air fiercely twisted and the phantom of a great array appeared, trapping the flame rune within. Lien Feng grinned. "The fire-bathing lineage's SOS token. Fortunately, I laid down an array before, otherwise it really would have been troublesome." He glanced at Zhang Ying. "Let's attack together to avoid any complications." As he finished speaking, he took a step forward. As his body shook, the rotten flesh and blood that adhered to his body suddenly broke off and flew out, covering Yin Che. Bang! Bang! Pieces of rotten flesh and blood exploded, turning into a thick black and scarlet mist. Yin Che hurriedly retreated. But no one expected that although Lien Feng had attacked him, his target wasn't him. Taking advantage of Yin Che's retreat, the skeletal Lien Feng raised his hand and punched at Zhou Huan. Roiling gray energy condensed, forming a bone dragon that roared and tore at Zhou Huan. Caught off guard, Zhou Huan's face paled. He screamed and threw out a treasure, exploding it with a loud explosion as he retreated. But at this time, his body froze. Zhang Ying's eyes had turned blood red. Her gaze was locked onto his body with an incomparably strange expression. Being locked onto by this pair of blood-red eyes, Zhou Huan's mind went blank for a moment and he froze in place. Although this process was brief, by the time he regained his composure, the bone dragon phantom was already in front of him and swallowed him whole. Ah! His miserable screams came to an abrupt end. The skeletal Lien Feng vigorously chewed. Although there was clearly nothing in his mouth, it emitted a zzz sound, and he swallowed a few times in a happy manner. Zhou Huan, honest Zhou Cheng's eyes instantly turned red. The two were brothers of the same clan and had grown up together. They had a close relationship. Lien Feng laughed as he ate. Don't worry, it's your turn next. As he spoke, his complexion suddenly changed. The array phantom that sealed the flame rune fiercely shook. In the next moment, it shattered. Whoosh! The flame rune soared into the sky. Lien Feng screamed miserably and vomited in great mouthfuls. Although he was clearly a skeleton, he actually spat out pieces of chewed flesh and blood. Mixed within were pieces of robe. This was Zhou Huan, who had just been swallowed by the bone dragon phantom. Be careful, someone has broken in. Yin Shi's complexion changed. Just as he was about to bring her away, he froze. With one hand, he grabbed her neck and twisted it forcefully. Kacha! The crisp sound of bones breaking was followed by the sound of flesh tearing apart. Her entire head was torn off and tossed to the ground. It spun several times, her eyes wide and her face filled with fear. Save me! Hurry and save me! Her head screamed on the ground. But she only had time to shout twice before the light in her eyes rapidly dimmed. Pa! With a light sound, Yin Shi's head exploded and her corpse fell to the ground, rotting away in the blink of an eye. It was as if this woman had died many years ago, and it was only because of some unknown force that she was able to maintain her appearance when she was alive. And just now, after her head was torn off, the strength that kept her alive was also destroyed. Yin Shi fell backwards into a firm embrace. Her eyes widened. Big brother Qin. As she spoke, she spat out blood. Her body was crimson, like a piece of red-hot iron. Qin Yu frowned. He lifted a hand and placed it between her eyebrows. Don't speak. Go to sleep first. A dark mark appeared between Yin Shi's eyebrows. The terrifying temperature that she released immediately began to rapidly decrease. Her exposed skin also returned to normal in a breath of time. But Qin Yu knew that he was only forcefully suppressing the backlash of Yin Shi's bloodline. This could be considered a temporary solution. Brother Qin. Yin Che's face lit up with joy. Then, he revealed a look of shame. Qin Yu flicked his sleeves. Strength gushed out from a void and pulled back Yin Che and the red-eyed Zhou Cheng. You two leave first. As he spoke, he handed Yin Shi over to them. Yin Che's eyes widened. Brother Qin, let's go. Qin Yu didn't explain further. Yin Che clenched his teeth. He held onto Yin Shi with one hand and grabbed onto Zhou Cheng with the other. Then, he turned and rushed out of the valley. Skeleton Lien Feng's two eye sockets were completely empty. Now he stubbornly stared at Qin Yu and screamed, Who are you? Zhang Ying's eyes were blood red. She whispered, I can't lock onto his aura. This was the first time such a situation had occurred. Although she had ended up in a state that was neither human nor ghost, she still retained the abilities of the sly fate lineage. Qin Yu ignored them. His eyes fell onto the depths of the valley where the golden fruit tree quietly stood. He lightly said, Now that things have come to this, it's time for the main character to show himself. I can't always have these two puppets jump around in front of me. The valley was silent. Qin Yu had no expression. That's fine. I'll cripple these puppets first. Let's see just how long you can endure. He lifted a hand and pressed forward. His 5 fingers spread out like 5 great mountains, suppressing all directions. Lien Feng and Zhang Ying's complexions changed. At this time, in their perception, the world had turned dark. It was like an endless abyss, like the eternal night that came after the sun, as if it wanted to pull them in so that they would never be able to transcend. Bang! The golden fruit tree suddenly erupted with endless light. Every inch of its branches and leaves began to burn, emitting a blinding golden light. This endless light was like a sharp arrow that howled towards Qin Yu. The air violently twisted, as if it couldn't withstand the strength of the golden arrows of light. Pitch black cracks began to appear in the air. Endless darkness erupted with Qin Yu as the center. It was like a pitch-black maw that led to some unknown place. All of the light that shot towards him was swallowed up. However, only Qin Yu, who was in the darkness, knew that what was truly terrifying about these seemingly terrifying golden lights was the soul force contained within them. Or, it was more accurate to say that this was a kind of mutated soul force. It possessed a horrifying toxicity. Once it came into contact with the soul, it would corrode away like maggots that wouldn't stop until they died. The old turtle ate happily. His appetite was quite good. As long as it was soul force, he didn't care about the type. In fact, Qin Yu could even feel a trace of joy from his mood. This was probably because he had tasted a different kind of delicacy. However, according to the intensity of the soul force, the old turtle judged that the golden fruit tree in front of him was only an avatar. In other words, the true master wasn't here. Qin Yu immediately lost all thoughts of entangling himself with this old turtle. There were many people that rushed into the mystic realm, and there was no lack of powerful characters among them. He didn't want the chance he had chosen to become famous to be snatched away by someone else. Because of the repeated delays, he feared he didn't have enough time to cross the endless sea. Thus, Qin Yu couldn't lose this chance. Tell me where your main body is, and perhaps I can let you live. In the darkness, Qin Yu's calm voice echoed out. The golden fruit tree's surface erupted with an even more intense light. It dyed the entire mountain valley gold and tore apart all the clouds in the sky. The commotion became even greater. Soon, more people will be drawn over. Qin Yu shook his head. He stepped forwards. The darkness rushed deep into the mountain valley, towards the golden fruit tree that had taken root in the ground. It didn't resist, only passively withstanding it. But this was only what it saw on the surface, because the darkness was silent and swallowed up all of the golden light. Within the golden light, Lian Feng and Zhang Ying constantly shivered in fear. Suddenly, there was a sharp scream. This scream was aimed at the soul and couldn't be heard by the ears. In their fear, Lian Feng and Zhang Ying suddenly roared out in pain. Then, their bodies exploded and two phantoms rushed out, submerging into the ground where the golden fruit tree was. In the next moment, the ground shattered and countless golden roots tore through the earth. These roots were like chains that tightly wrapped around three corpses, one man and two women. However, one of the women's corpses instantly decayed as soon as they appeared, turning into powder. It was the dead Yao Ling whose head had been pulled off by Qin Yu just now. The other woman was Zhang Ying, and the unfamiliar man should be Lian Feng. Shua. On their pale faces, the two people opened their eyes. Golden light surged within them as they stared at Qin Yu. Who are you? The man and woman spoke in unison. Their deep voices were strange and stiff, without the slightest fluctuation of emotion. In the darkness, Qin Yu remained expressionless. Right now, my promise is still valid. Die. The man and woman roared out at the same time. They lifted their hands and formed complex hand seals. Golden light gathered around them, forming two terrifying marks. A boundless pressure was released, causing the darkness to shake and billowing waves to rise up. Bang, bang. The two marks howled out, crashing into the darkness. Qin Yu couldn't help but stop and sigh inwardly. As he thought, there were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this world. With his strength, he didn't fear the famous land of chaos too much. But now, it seemed that he had been too careless. Not to mention anything else, just this avatar alone had such strength. The dangers of this mystic realm far surpassed Qin Yu's imagination. If it weren't for the old turtle's existence, then these two marks would have been more than enough for Qin Yu to suffer. Of course, the reality was that they crashed into the darkness. Before they could even touch Qin Yu, they were cleanly swallowed up. It seemed that they had eaten too much. Chapter 1178. As the top boss of the death-fearing world, the degree to which he feared death was incomprehensible to the average person. To the old turtle, What did eating a bit of food count for? As long as he could extend his life, he could eat at least a dozen more of those marks. But soon, as the old turtle licked his lips in anticipation, he was disappointed to discover that he seemed to have overestimated the energy of this split fruit tree in front of him. After striking out 2 marks, the golden fruit tree's dazzling golden light clearly dimmed. The male and female corpses that were entangled by the golden roots were too shaken. They asked the same question once more. Who are you? In the darkness, Qin Yu frowned. He thought that this person was stubborn enough, but this sort of stubborn fellow would find it difficult to change their mind once they decided on something. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of them. Then, he wouldn't waste any more time. After all, the commotion here was far too great. Whether it was other cultivators or the life forms within the mystic realm, it would be much more troublesome. Bang! Darkness howled outwards, blotting out the skies like a great curtain. It submerged the golden fruit tree and the 2 corpses it controlled. The golden light that illuminated the world immediately vanished from sight. All that was left was tumbling darkness and a cold aura that filled the air. The golden fruit tree that was swallowed up by the darkness rapidly withered. Its branches and leaves scattered with the wind, until all that was left over was a golden crystal that was shaped like a heart. The roaring red-furred monster seemed to lose all strength as the golden fruit tree withered. As it struggled and howled, it turned to powder along with the golden fruit tree. Qin Yu lifted his hand and grasped the crystal. As he felt the boundless soul strength within, a dignified expression crossed his face. Such a formidable soul strength was actually just a split body. Although he already knew this, he was still shaken after personally confirming it. Now, the only thing Qin Yu was curious about was how many split bodies similar to the heart-shaped crystal in his hand were in this mystic realm. If there were 3 or 5, then that would be fine. But if there were more than 10, then the big fellow hidden in this mystic realm would be difficult to deal with. As Qin Yu was secretly calculating, as the golden fruit tree withered and died, the 2 corpses it controlled began to gently shiver. The eyes of the man's corpse rapidly trembled as he desperately tried to open them. But right at this time, strange blood-red lines appeared on his face. Then, his body rapidly rotted away. Wisps of greenish-white gas came out of the rotten corpse and were absorbed by the female corpse next to it. She opened her eyes. His eyes were crimson, exactly the same as the blood-colored lines on the rotten man's face. Confusion flashed in her blood-red eyes before she immediately regained focus. As she looked at Qin Yu, the blood-red light in her eyes suddenly rose. Qin Yu's heart shrank. A trace of dread and unease broke into his mind. He lifted his hand and grasped the air. Bang! The endless darkness collapsed inward, as if a ferocious mouth had suddenly appeared and swallowed the blood-eyed woman. Don't kill me. I have the bloodline of the Sly Fate clan. If you take my life, you'll definitely be hunted down to the ends of the earth. Qin Yu was expressionless. His fingers clenched together. The woman's scream came to an abrupt end. He had heard of the Sly Fate clan twice, but he had already rushed through the abyssal world, so why would he fear them? Since he had schemed against him, then he should be prepared for death to knock on his door. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He looked down at his palm. Blood-red lines appeared on the back of his hand, constantly extending upwards as if they were alive. At the same time, traces of an extremely cold aura were released, drilling deep into Qin Yu's body. Humph! This was a mark left behind by killing the Sly Fate clan. It really was strange. But to Qin Yu, it wasn't like there was no way around it. With a thought, the blood-red lines on the back of his hand stopped growing. Then they shrank back, forming a round dot on the back of his hand that looked like a blood mole. But this was all he could do. There was no way to completely expel this strength from his body. Qin Yu frowned for a moment before composing himself. He took a step forward, his figure howling. Outside the mountain valley, Yin Che was holding the unconscious Master Shi. Master Yin and Zhou Cheng were anxiously waiting. The reason they hadn't chosen to leave was because Qin Yu had saved them, and because Master Yun's condition was terrible. The golden light that shot into the heavens and the extremely terrifying fluctuations of strength that erupted from within the mountain valley left the two of them panic-stricken. At the same time, they also understood why Chinyu wanted them to leave. If they stayed in the mountain valley, just the shockwaves alone would be enough to take their lives. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, Yun-Che saw Chinyu fly out. He let out a long breath of relief and hurried over. Chinyu glanced at them. "Let's leave this place first." With a flick of his sleeves, he swept the three of them away. Without any hesitation, he flew into the distance and soon disappeared from sight. An hour after Chinyu's group of four left, a meteor smashed into the ground, creating a terrifying crater. Scorched black soil splashed outwards and countless cracks spread out. From the raging flames, a young man walked out. He had an ordinary appearance and a bald head. His clothes were also very casual. If this were a different scene, perhaps it would be a little funny, but now, the only feeling one felt was horror. After walking out of the crater, the bald man entered the mountain valley. His pace wasn't fast, but every step he took left behind a scorched black footprint. His eyes swept over the messy mountain valley that had been ravaged by darkness. Suddenly, he raised his hand and grasped forward. Several sparks appeared out of thin air and fell into his palm. It was indeed the aura of the fire-bathing lineage, but it was very unfamiliar. In this endless sea trial, he was the only one from his clan to enter. Where did the other clansmen come from? Moreover, there was another point. The aura that remained here wasn't too pure. His eyes flashed, and the bald man let go, allowing the sparks in his palm to dissipate. He had already memorized this aura. As long as this person was still in the mystic realm, he would encounter him sooner or later. But this mountain valley, what a tyrannical aura. Even though most of it had already dissipated, just the remnant portion alone wasn't difficult to deduce what had happened here not too long ago. Indeed, it was just as the patriarch had said. This endless sea trial wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Many cultivators with formidable strengths had stepped into the valley with their own objectives. Today, Flaming Wind had noticed one such person in this gorge. He silently asked himself if he could defeat the cultivator in this mountain valley. The answer was that he didn't know. If he didn't know, then that meant he wasn't certain. In other words, if both sides fought with their lives on the line, it was highly likely that he would be the one to die. Burning Wind smiled. Yes, he really did smile, and it came from his heart. How dull and dull was the cultivation of the great Tao. Only when powerful opponents appeared one after another could one maintain their fighting spirit. Powerful opponents weren't terrifying. As long as one defeated them and stepped on them one by one, they could constantly grow stronger. The smiling Burning Wind was in a good mood. This caused him to change his mind about attacking. He turned and said, "You sly Fate Clan people are always sneaky and sneaky. Since you've already arrived here, you might as well come out." Humph! With a cold sneer, the air twisted and a cold and gloomy man appeared. His appearance was similar to the male and female corpses that Chinyu had seen before. Both of them had pale blue faces without the slightest hint of blood. The only difference was that this cold man's eyes were very bright, shining like two long sabers that were whistling and dancing in the air. If it weren't for the remnant aura here completely disagreeing with you, I would have already attacked just now. The cold and gloomy man's voice was icy cold. For killing someone of my sly Fate Clan's bloodline, no matter where you go, you won't be able to escape the fate of paying with blood. Burning Wind's smile faded. The one who attacked us in the mountain valley isn't any weaker than you or me. If we really encountered him, it's hard to say who would die. Hooking Soul, you better think this through. The cold-looking man turned around and left. He'll be the one to die. Space distorted, and his whole person was like a shadow. After a few steps, he disappeared. At the same time, the extremely cold aura that emanated from his body also disappeared. It was as if he had never been here in the first place. In fact, if one were to look closely, they would discover that the cold and sinister man was walking towards them. Not even footprints were left in this place. The Sly Fate Clan was said to be able to control fate and alter life and death. They were one of the most mysterious clans in the world. The members of their clan were elusive, and they would disappear as soon as lightning appeared. It was difficult for ordinary people to find traces of them. And Bewitching Soul was one of the most outstanding members of the Sly Fate tribe's younger generation. Rumor had it that he already possessed the strength of an Anikia Helgard, making him the most terrifying existence in the Sly Fate clan apart from a few old bones. Burning Wind said softly, "You've been targeted by soul reaping. Don't die easily. Otherwise, it will be too boring." As he turned around, flames appeared out of thin air, wreaking havoc as they devoured his figure. The next moment, the burning flame suddenly disappeared, and Ranfang's figure also disappeared along with it. Qingyu glanced behind him. Just now, there were some ripples in his mind. There was a faint restlessness. It was like he had been locked onto by a predator hidden in the darkness. He was certain that what happened in the mountain valley had been discovered by someone. If he could sense something and feel uneasy, then this person must be incredibly strong. But who was it? Qingyu glanced at Yunshi, who was being held in Yunche's arms. The fire-bathing lineage should be there. Moreover, it might be the Sly Fate clan that the female corpse had mentioned before she died. Although Qingyu didn't know much about these two sides, he had heard Yunche and the others mention them before he left the ship. It seemed that they were both extraordinary family inheritances. Yunche had been waiting outside the valley for him to come out, so Qingyu could naturally guess what he was thinking. Then, even if he didn't say anything about the fire-bathing lineage, he would have mentioned it on his own initiative. Qingyu's eyes flashed. He stopped and pointed to the ground. "Let's rest here for now." He landed on the ground and found a hidden place. After sweeping out with his divine sense and confirming that there was no danger, he nodded. "Who?" Yunche let out a long breath. He carefully placed Yunshi down and bowed. "Thank you, Brother Qin, for saving me. I was blind before, and I ask Brother Qin to forgive me for my disrespect." Qinyu waved his hand. "Since I helped you, I didn't care about this matter. Moreover, I had my own considerations." His words weren't tactful, but Yunche truly relaxed. The more Qinyu acted like this, the more it showed that he truly didn't care. Only after confirming that Qinyu had forgiven him could Yunche ask him to save him. "Brother Qin, my little sister's life is in danger. I ask that you save her on account of her sincerity towards you." Qinyu glanced at Yunshi. The dark mark between her eyebrows had dimmed a great deal. He frowned. Her bloodline had gone berserk and was stronger than he had imagined. Fire-bathing lineage. With such a tyrannical bloodline, her strength could be imagined. Just as Qinyu was about to speak, his complexion changed. He lifted a hand and pressed it against the ground. A wild strength instantly erupted outwards. Dong! The entire earth violently shook. Countless cracks exploded outwards. A pained scream rang out. A monster beast that looked like a rat that had been hiding in the dark had its head blown apart. Looking at its corpse, Qinyu frowned, surprise in his eyes. He lifted his hand, and a lotus flower appeared in his palm. It was beautiful and vibrant. Suddenly, the lotus flower moved without wind, releasing a swallowing strength. Motes of golden light flew out from the monster beast's corpse and were instantly absorbed by the lotus flower. After it was completed, the luster it emitted was several times brighter than before. He was right. Qinyu put away the lotus flower. His eyes fell on Yunshi once more. This time, they were a bit more dignified. This rat-like monster beast had an extremely strong ability to conceal its aura. If not for the old turtle warning him, he wouldn't have been able to sense it. Its target was none other than the unconscious Yunshi. The facts proved that this monster beast was being controlled. Behind it was the powerful soul form that Qinyu was secretly startled to find hiding in this mystic realm. But what was the reason? Chapter 1179. Master Yin wasn't too strong. The only surprising thing about him was that he had a berserk fire bloodline. But Qinyu could sense that this bloodline wasn't enough to attract the powerful soul bodies in the mystic realm. The possibility of this being a coincidence was so low that it could be ignored. In other words, there was a high chance that Master Yun was hiding some attribute that Qin Yu hadn't noticed yet. And this attribute was extremely attractive to the powerful soul bodies hidden in the mystic realm. But this assumption didn't make sense. If this was the case, then why did the powerful soul bodies in the mystic realm only send out such a weak monster beast? After all, besides its superb concealment ability, the monster beast's strength was nearly negligible after being killed by Qin Yu. Perhaps it was because it was in the middle of something important and couldn't spare too much strength, or perhaps it was tied up by something else. After all, it wasn't just Qin Yu and his group that had entered the mystic realm. Who knew how many tyrannical characters were hidden within? Qin Yu took a deep breath and steadied his thoughts. His eyes fell on Master Yin. He had originally decided to do his best to save Master Yin. But now, do my best had become definitely. Qin Yu's intuition told him that Master Yun was likely the key to finding the soul bodies in the mystic realm. Yunshe was startled and angry. This is... Qin Yu had no intention of explaining. I will carefully examine her first. Tell me everything about Master Yin. Complete meant not hiding anything. The more comprehensive the information he knew, the more likely he was to find the crux of the problem and save her life. Yunshe was clearly hesitant, but he soon understood. He glanced at Zhou Cheng. The honest man hadn't yet emerged from his depressed state. He dryly said that he was going to guard the surroundings and then walked away. Qin Yu didn't wait. After speaking, he began to examine Master Yun's condition in detail. Finger contact was unavoidable. This was a bloodline backlash. Although the dark mark had barely suppressed it, internal injuries had already occurred. Qin Yu had to determine the severity of these injuries. He could only apologize in his heart and ensure that he didn't look sideways. Then, he heard an incomparably cliché story from Yunshe's mouth. In summary, it was simple. A heartless man abandoned his wife and son. The man he spoke of came from the fire lineage. Because he had a union with a woman from the outside, his bloodline inheritance was incomplete. Yunshe did not awaken, but Yunshi's luck was a little worse. She said that she was unlucky because the flame baptism bloodline in her body was not complete, so it was not stable. The reason she could live until now was because it had been in a sealed state. Once it was activated, the berserk bloodline power would burn her to ashes from the inside out. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pinched the point between his eyebrows. This was a completely subconscious action, but he could smell the faint fragrance of a woman on his fingertips. He coughed lightly and put down his hand. I already know what happened. Let me think about it. Everything in the world seemed simple, but in reality, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Take Yunshi's condition, for example. The crux of the problem was that his bloodline was incomplete. All he had to do was fix it. Such a simple matter. But the problem was how to make up for it. Of course, if one were to cripple her bloodline of flames, Yunshi might still be able to survive. However, if she were to suffer the backlash from her bloodline, she would only be able to remain as a living corpse for the rest of her life. Mending the bloodline, or thinking of other alternatives, should be the only choice. Qin Yu had many methods to kill, but if he were to save someone, he still had the potion that Liao Shi had left for him. But that thing was for the abyssal races to use. If he fed it to Yunshi, it would be no different from murder. There was nothing he could do about it. No matter how long he thought about it, it would only be a waste of time. Luckily, the one using his brain right now wasn't Qin Yu. He directly laid down his words. It was likely that Yunshi was the key to capturing a powerful soul body in the mystic realm. She absolutely could not die. To the old turtle, the soul strength contained within the golden crystal heart had already caused his liver to tremble with excitement. His desire to possess the main body that had split off from this heart had reached an unprecedented peak. At this time, let alone thinking of a way to save Yunshi, even if he had to reveal himself and run a circle around the mystic realm naked, he would still seriously consider it. Pressure was a driving force. But what was stronger than pressure was an infinitely burning passion for life. With the help of this passion, the old turtle actually thought of a way to save Yunshi. mending the bloodline. Indeed, there was nothing new about this idea. But he didn't just say it out loud. Rather, he provided Chinyu with a relatively perfect plan. After careful deliberation, he found that there was indeed a high chance of success. Of course, a 100% guarantee was impossible. In addition, this method came from the shadow of the abyss. If he used it in the vast Yang world, who knew whether or not some inexplicable change would occur? But this was already enough. It was better than waiting for Yun Shi to die in this state. Chinyu lifted a hand and placed it between her eyebrows. After several breaths of time, he took it back. As he poured strength into it, the dark mark began to brighten. But Chinyu was well aware that the time it could be maintained was limited. Moreover, as more strength was poured into it, it would become shorter and shorter. He stood up and looked at Yun Shi. He directly said, "I have already thought of a way to save her, but the process will be dangerous. You and Zhou Cheng cannot follow me." This was the truth. For instance, in the battle in the mountain valley, Yun Shi and Zhou Cheng had to retreat first. Otherwise, they would have been in great danger. This time, they had been given time to retreat. But what about next time? It had to be known that life-saving methods were never easy to achieve. Moreover, the method that the old turtle from the abyss had given Qin Yu could be considered harsh and cruel no matter how one looked at it. Qin Yu himself might have to take a risk, but he didn't have full confidence that he could guarantee their safety. Yun Shi's complexion changed. He glanced at the unconscious Yun Shi and clenched his teeth. He turned and knelt to the ground. "Brother Qin, I leave my sister to you. If you can save her life, I will never forget this great kindness." Qin Yu accepted his kneeling. "I will do my best." He picked up Yun Shi and turned. With several flickers, he vanished from sight. Zhou Cheng ran over, his eyes wide. What happened? Where did Qin Yu take Yun Shi? Yun Shi bitterly smiled. "I don't know, but this is Yun Shi's only hope of survival." They hadn't known each other for long. Even if he was saved by Qin Yu, as he said, he had his own reasons for doing things. In terms of his heart, Yun Shi certainly couldn't trust Qin Yu without reservation. But he had no other choice. Otherwise, he could only watch helplessly on as Yun Shi was burned to death by the rampaging fire bloodline. Carrying the unconscious Yun Shi, Qin Yu's speed was much slower. He had to be more cautious to avoid falling into a dangerous situation. The current Yun Shi didn't have the strength to protect herself. The slightest mistake could cost her life. Luckily, he wasn't pressed for time. Moreover, Qin Yu already knew where to find the person who could save Yun Shi. That's right, it was one person. According to the rules of the abyss that the old turtle spoke of, in order to save one person's life, one had to give up another. This was in accordance with the principle of fairness. This was the principle of fair exchange. Yun Shi's bloodline was incomplete, causing her to go berserk and pose a threat to her life. Then, he would extract a complete one, fuse the two together, and then return it to her body. Everything would be easily solved. If Yun Shi was lucky, she might even be able to profit from this disaster. Her bloodline would become incomparably powerful. But, as I said before, everything was easier said than done. This was no simple matter and required extremely harsh conditions. If it weren't for the old turtle helping him, it would have been impossible for Qin Yu to accomplish this. Bang! The ground suddenly shattered and countless palm-sized winged insects drilled out. They opened their mouths wide and screeched, revealing their fangs. As their shrill screeches entered his ears, they were like thin needles that ruthlessly pierced through his skull, twisting and turning in his mind. At the same time, these fierce-looking little things that had extremely sharp teeth began to flap their wings and rush over. "Umph!" Qin Yu coldly coughed. He came to a stop and stomped his feet. Bang! With a dull thud, the void trembled. Ripples spread out in all directions. Pa! Pa! The insects that rushed over were crushed to pieces. Flesh and blood splashed out, and a foul stench filled the air. But the death of their own kind didn't scare them away. Instead, they became even more ruthless. In the blink of an eye, an endless stream of insects rushed out from the ground. They used the fragments of their corpses to submerge Qin Yu, who was holding onto Yunshi. Although they weren't strong individually, they didn't fear death. In addition to their large numbers, there was simply an endless stream of them. If he killed one, then two would come. It was like ants biting an elephant to death. If he continued to be surrounded like this, once he exhausted all his strength, all that awaited him would be nothing but death. Perhaps it was because the mark of darkness had taken effect, and Qin Yu's body had recovered a little, or perhaps it was because of the endless insect monsters that the screeches were simply too terrifying. The sleeping Yunshi's face paled. Her body trembled as she opened her eyes. She had a pained expression, and blood began to seep out from the corners of her eyes. Qin Yu lifted a hand and placed it between her eyebrows. "Don't listen to me. We will be able to leave soon." Yunshi struggled to speak. Big brother Qin, she wasn't dead yet. But it was truly excruciating. It was as if many red-hot irons had been shoved into her body. At every moment, her flesh and blood were being burned. The endless pain was enough to cause one's consciousness to collapse. Yunshi instinctively hugged Qin Yu. "Big brother Qin, I feel so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable." Qin Yu parted his fingers, revealing a crack. He looked at her struggling eyes and said, "If you feel uncomfortable, it means that you are still alive. Trust me, you will be fine soon." Without waiting for Yunshi's reply, Qin Yu exerted a bit more strength with his other hand. The pained Yunshi's eyes rolled back, and she fainted once more. The mark of darkness between her eyebrows was much dimmer than it was at the start. This was much faster than Qin Yu had expected. The situation was extremely tricky. Taking a deep breath, Qin Yu pulled out a hand and clenched his fingers into a fist. He let out a deep breath and punched forwards. Dong! It was like an incomparably large leather drum had been struck. As the drum vibrated, it set off a ring of fluctuations. Wherever these fluctuations swept out, all of the ferocious and fearless insect monsters instantly froze where they were. In the next moment, there was a series of crackling sounds. Countless corpses and pieces of flesh rained down like a downpour of flesh and blood. Chapter 1180. In this world, there was no true fairness or justice. Treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime meant that if one took a treasure that didn't match one's strength, they would provoke a disaster. This was easier to deal with. If one tactfully made a deal or took the initiative to offer treasures to find a backer, then losses were losses and they could still ensure their own safety. But what if this jade pendant was your body? What would you do then? Through a lucky chance, it gave birth to sentience and experienced countless trials and tribulations to grow. But in the end, it was discovered that it was nothing more than a meal chosen by others. This result was difficult to accept. Since it wasn't willing to accept it, it could only resist. The difficulty was obvious. After all, in terms of strength, the difference was far too great. Or it was more accurate to say that in this vast world, how many people had the strength to protect themselves when faced with the greed of these people? If the road of resistance couldn't be taken, then it could only think of a solution from within itself. Since what they wanted was the strength born in my body, then they would stain it and make it lose all value. Of course, this road wasn't easy to walk and was incomparably dangerous. But if there was another choice, who would make this choice? Hate. Of course it was hate. But this was how the world had been since ancient times. It wasn't the first to suffer this, nor would it be the last. In this world, the only thing it could do was endure. So this was fate. This was my fate, and also your fate. No one could blame anyone else. If there was something to blame, then blame yourself for living in this world. Qin Yu's journey became even more difficult. If it weren't for his experience in the abyss and his strength greatly increasing, he might have already died. All sorts of monsters from mystic realms attacked him without end. He was like a bonfire in the dark night, attracting fangs from all directions. Of course, Qin Yu was well aware that while he was the one bearing the attacks of the monsters from the mystic realm, the true source of attraction was Master Yin. If Qin Yu had some doubts about his previous conjecture, Then now he was absolutely sure. Master Yin did possess a special attribute that attracted the soul bodies of mystic realms. There was also one more thing he could confirm. This soul body that split into countless avatars and attracted cultivators into the mystic realm was currently occupied by something. Otherwise, the attacks that Qin Yu withstood wouldn't be so simple. Simple was only relatively speaking. If it were any other cultivator, even an original soul realm powerhouse wouldn't necessarily be able to withstand it. Qin Yu's current condition was okay. There shouldn't be any problems in the near future. However, if this were to continue, it would only be a matter of time before something went wrong. As he thought of how Yun Shay had knelt down when they parted, he said, "Tell me the second method." The old turtle inwardly curled his lips. He knew that Qin Yu would say something like this. With such a soft-hearted temperament, sooner or later he would suffer a great loss. Although he was dissatisfied, he didn't dare to reveal any of it. The second method is relatively safer, but it will place a great burden on you. Qin Yu had already tried to use the sun and moon force fields to cover Master Yun, but it was ultimately useless. But the old turtle's second method was still related to the sun and moon force fields. In simpler terms, it was to borrow the power of darkness and light to form a dark moon and a scarlet sun. Then, according to a method similar to the sun and moon force fields, he would brand them into Master Yun's body. Although it sounded simple, it was extremely difficult. Moreover, it would cause a tremendous loss to Qin Yu. The old turtle hesitated for a moment before saying, "Master, this mystic realm is not simple. I fear that a fierce battle will be unavoidable in the end. If you use up too much of your strength, there is a high chance you will encounter danger." His words were earnest, as if he were wholeheartedly thinking for Qin Yu. Qin Yu certainly knew that the old turtle was afraid that if something happened to Qin Yu, he would also suffer misfortune. But what he said wasn't wrong. In this mystic realm, there was absolutely a terrifying soul body hidden within. If Qin Yu had just wanted to stop while he was ahead, then that was fine. But since he had locked onto this soul body, a great battle was unavoidable. Moreover, in this current situation, because of Master Yun, even if Qin Yu wanted to stop while he was ahead, the soul body in this mystic realm might not let him go. Qin Yu's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He took a deep breath and said, "I'll use the second method. There isn't much time, so just tell me what to do." A day later, Qin Yu carried Master Yun out of the cave. His complexion was pale, as if he had lost a great deal of blood. His eyes had also dimmed a few degrees. The old turtle's second method had succeeded. The mark of darkness between Master Yun's eyebrows had been replaced by 2 dots, one black and one red. If one looked carefully, they would discover that although these 2 dots were only the size of a pinky finger, they emitted a formidable aura. The dark moon was like an abyss, capable of swallowing all. The red sun was like charcoal. Although it didn't have blazing flames, it could burn all things to ashes. With each other as the dots, they constantly revolved, perfectly fusing the strength of light and darkness together. This was already the limit of what Qin Yu could accomplish. Although he had comprehended the truth of light and darkness as one, understanding and grasping them were 2 completely different matters. Without the help of the old turtle, it would have been impossible for Qin Yu to accomplish this in a single day. But even if he succeeded, condensing the dark moon and red sun, as well as maintaining their existence, the consumption was far greater than he had imagined. In order to continuously extract energy, he had to ensure a constant supply of energy. Otherwise, if the dark moon and red sun collapsed, not only would his aura ceiling fail, but would also cause severe damage to Master Yin. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. He looked up towards the depths of the mystic realm. The crystal heart he obtained from killing the golden fruit tree was, strictly speaking, also a keepsake. If the lotus flower was the key to entering the mystic realm, then this crystal heart was the pass to find the mystic realm soul bodies. It seemed to be filtering, selecting the most outstanding and powerful cultivators, and drawing them in step by step. Qin Yu didn't know what the reason was, but there was one thing he could be sure of. The other cultivator of the fire-bathing lineage in the mystic realm would definitely go there. He was the one Qin you had chosen to save Master Yun's life. He was also the one who would be sacrificed in exchange for his life. This was the reason why Qin Yu had allowed Yin Che and Zhou Cheng to leave, even though he didn't know that he would face the crazy pursuit of the mystic realm soul bodies. The rampaging fire-bathing lineage in Master Yun's body wasn't complete, yet he was already so powerful. The strength of a cultivator with a complete bloodline could be imagined. It wouldn't be simple to take his life. A battle was inevitable. If he was in his peak state, Qin Yu was confident that no one in this mystic realm would be his match. But now, he could only be more careful. He would take things one step at a time, looking for the best opportunity to strike and kill with a single strike. He continued on his way. Although there would still be trouble, compared to before, it was a much smoother journey. With the help of the golden crystal heart, Qin Yu could faintly sense the approximate location of the mystic realm soul bodies. That place was temporarily quiet. Time wasn't tight, and there was no need to hurry. Qin Yu even began to use the time he had to travel to adjust his condition. It was impossible for him to return to his peak state, but he could still erupt with more strength. Every bit of improvement he made now could play a crucial role in determining life or death in a battle. Hooking's soul stood in the shadows. 3 cultivators stood in front of him, 2 men and 1 woman. All of them had dull expressions and empty eyes. He flicked his fingers, and 3 drops of blood flew out. They opened their mouths and swallowed them. Remember this taste. Find a person who has it and tell me where he is. The 2 men and 1 woman bowed. Yes, master. Hooking's soul turned and walked away. The 3 cultivators that were frozen in place suddenly began to shine with light from the depths of their empty eyes. Their entire bodies seemed to come alive. Their complexions changed. They swept their eyes around, but didn't notice anything wrong. What happened just now? Why were their memories blank? But they knew that something must have happened. It was just that they couldn't remember what it was. Let's go. The 3 people glanced at each other and then hurried away. No matter what happened, leaving here first was the correct choice. As the 3 hesitant cultivators sped off into the distance, Bewitching Soul stood at the peak of a mountain, his robes fluttering in the wind. His ashen face seemed even colder than before. The puppets had already been laid down. Finding and killing the person with the Hooking Soul bloodline was only a matter of time. Now it was time to leave. A sharp light flashed in the depths of Hooking Soul's icy eyes. He really did want to know what it was that could cause such a great figure to soar through the clouds of the highest heavens to fight over. If it was really as he guessed. Hooking Soul licked his lips. What was different from his pale blue face was that his tongue was dyed red with blood. Risks were certain. If he were to snatch food from the mouths of these great figures, a single mistake would result in a calamity. But risks and benefits were always equal. He would take things one step at a time. As time passed and the situation changed, he would need to constantly adjust. Thinking too much about it was useless. Schwa. With a single step, Hooking Soul vanished like a wisp of blue smoke. Qin Yu carried Master Cloud on his back. As he looked at the scholar in front of him who was holding a scroll and smiling warmly, he subconsciously tensed up. Between the 2 of them, corpses were strewn all over the ground. Looking at their appearances after they died, it seemed they had killed each other. And the one who had led all of this was the blue-robed scholar in front of him. The 2 looked at each other for a moment. Then, the scholar cupped his hands together and bowed. Fellow Taoist, how do you do? This is the first time we meet. I am Ruan Jing from Xianzhang Academy. He was elegant and refined, like 2 scholars meeting on a willow bank. They would admire each other and introduce each other's names to form a friendship. But in the end, that wasn't the case. Now that the ground was littered with corpses and the smell of blood filled the air, Ruan Jing's appearance would make one's hair stand on end. Qin Yu returned the greeting. Qin Yu. Ruan Jing clapped his hands together, a look of praise on his face. Historical records say that in ancient times, there was a great country named Qin. Its strength was tyrannical, and it unified the world. Everything within the universe was its territory, and trillions of lives were ruled over. It was a land of endless prosperity and glory. Your name is truly wonderful. Qin Yu's lips twitched. This was the first time he had heard this. Could this be considered praise? Thinking for a moment, he met Ruan Jing's gaze and nodded. Thank you. Towards this blue-robed scholar. Qin Yu didn't want to speak too much. It wasn't because he had killed someone, but because of the dread he felt from the bottom of his heart. From the moment they met until now, his expression had been gentle and cordial, and there wasn't the least bit of hostility in his words. But the more he acted like this, the more uneasy he felt. He always felt as if this person could tear apart his skin at any moment and reveal his fierce claws and teeth. If he didn't want to speak, then he wouldn't. Qin Yu said, "Farewell." He didn't turn around. He drew backwards. Ruan Jing lifted a hand. "Sir Qin, please wait a moment. I have a request." As he spoke, he pointed a finger at Teacher Yin. "Because of an accident, my maid went missing, and my only hobby is to read. As the saying goes, adding fragrance to one's sleeves is what I love the most. If Sir Qin is willing to give this woman to me, I will be eternally grateful." Qin Yu said, "I don't want to." Ruan Jing frowned. "Sir, are you really not willing to part with her?" Qin Yu's eyes turned cold. "Yes." The air fell silent. After several breaths of time, Ruan Jing sighed. "That's fine. Since that's the case, I won't take away what others love. Farewell." He cupped his hands together and walked away. His long sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he exuded an ethereal aura. In several blinks of an eye, he vanished from sight. Qin Yu turned and walked away. Chapter 1181. After changing directions, Qin Yu came to a stop. He turned around without expression. "Ruan Jing, if you continue to follow behind me, don't blame me for being impolite." The space was silent. Qin Yu coldly snorted. He lifted a hand and pressed it forward. With a loud bang, space twisted. Within the shaking ripples, a figure appeared. It was Ruan Jing, who had just left. He had a look of praise on his face as he clapped his hands, without the slightest bit of embarrassment after being forced out. "Sir Qin's cultivation is quite good. Ruan Jing believes that his ability to conceal his aura isn't weak, but I still wasn't able to avoid your senses." Qin Yu was expressionless. "Give me an explanation." An icy cold aura broke out from his body, as sharp as a blade. Ruan Jing's smile became even brighter. "Sir Qin, please calm your anger. I was wrong in this matter, but I do like the woman behind you." He lifted his palm, and light surged. This is something Ruan Jing obtained after killing a fierce monster plant. Its core contains a formidable soul strength. In addition, it is likely a keepsake that points to the greatest lucky chance in this mystic realm. He paused for a moment and continued to say, "If Sir Qin agrees to part with her, this can be considered compensation. It will not disappoint you." Qin Yu could immediately determine that the golden bead in Ruan Jing's palm was of the same quality as the crystal he obtained after killing the golden fruit tree. He wasn't lying. Moreover, strictly speaking, he was extremely sincere. After all, to kill a monster plant on the same level as the golden fruit tree wasn't an easy matter. This thing was extremely precious. But Qin Yu already had a similar keepsake. Even if he didn't, he still wouldn't agree. Although Qin Yu thought this, he didn't immediately refuse. He stared at the bead several times and said, "I want to know why you are doing this." Before Ruan Jing could speak, Qin Yu sneered. "You don't need to say things like you find her pleasing to the eye or you like her." Ruan Jing faintly smiled. He thought for a moment and said, "In truth, I can't say for sure. But I always feel that there is something special about this young lady that I'm interested in." Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. "You aren't telling the truth." Ruan Jing said, "Young Master Qin, what do I have to do to make you believe?" He suddenly shut his mouth and didn't speak. His smiling face now revealed a trace of gloominess. "Young Master Qin, you want to get information from me? You have already decided to reject my deal." Of course, it wasn't a question. Qin Yu met his gaze and nodded. "That's right. He dreaded Ruan Jing and didn't want to come into conflict with him, but that didn't mean he feared him. Even if he wasn't at his peak, he was confident that he would be the one laughing in the end if they were to fight. Moreover, his intuition told him that he couldn't show the slightest bit of cowardice at this moment. The tougher his attitude was, the more likely it was that he would be able to avoid setbacks. The smile on Ruan Jing's face completely vanished. His facial features were elegant and refined. When he smiled, he gave off an incomparably amiable feeling. But when he was gloomy, he seemed exceptionally cold and solemn. Good, very good. He deeply looked at Qin Yu and took a step back. Then, as if he had fallen into water, he vanished from sight. He didn't say anything more. He only left this sentence behind and left decisively. Qin Yu could confirm that Ruan Jing had truly left. But his complexion didn't relax at all. Rather, it became even more dignified. On the surface, this matter seemed to have ended with Ruan Jing retreating. But in reality, both sides were already standing on opposite sides. It was only because he feared Qin Yu's strength that he didn't attack. If they were to meet again in the future, they would be enemies. If there was a chance, Ruan Jing would attack without hesitation and throw Qin Yu into the abyss. This was truly a disaster, knocking on one's door on the road. Everything was fine, and yet he had provoked such a tyrannical enemy. Qin Yu felt a bit depressed, but he soon suppressed it. At the very least, through this matter, he had confirmed his speculations. Master Yin really did have an attribute he hadn't noticed before. It was this attribute that caused the mystic realm's soul body to chase after him relentlessly, provoking Ruan Jing to fall out with him. Just what was it? Qin Yu was incomparably curious. But now clearly wasn't the time to express his curiosity. After waiting for a moment and making sure that Ruan Jing hadn't returned, Qin Yu shot up into the skies. If he thought about it carefully, if he wanted to kill the cultivators of the Bathing Fire clan to save Master Yin, he would have to kill the female corpse of the Sly Life clan. That would also bring about trouble. And there was also Ruan Jing from Xiangzhang Academy. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. His recent luck didn't seem to be too good. He was about to provoke one of the tyrannical cultivators of the mystic realm. Don't randomly choose a target. There was already enough trouble on his hands. If he provoked a few more, he would have to seriously consider what position he should use when escaping. Qin Yu was confident in his own strength, but he wouldn't be arrogant. Just how vast was the vast Yang world? Even if he had many lucky chances and good fortune, that didn't mean there were no people stronger than him. Ruan Jing was a good example. Although he didn't attack in the end and took the initiative to retreat, Qin Yu could still feel an intense aura coming from his body. Shaking his head, Qin Yu shook these thoughts away. He chose a new direction and rapidly flew away. Ruan Jing, who hadn't fallen out with Qin Yu, had fallen out with another person. Terrifying fluctuations of strength wildly shook the air, tumbling like a tide. Sword energy swept out, cutting down without end. Space was torn apart, and tiny cracks appeared. An icy voice sounded out from the endless sword phantoms. Ruan Jing, if you continue to act crazily, don't blame me for being impolite. With his voice, a sword cry sounded out, instantly suppressing all the howling sword intent. Sharp, overbearing, all-conquering. Bang! Ruan Jing lifted a hand to shatter the sword light. His figure flashed backwards. He let out a long breath, a smile on his face. Nice, this feels great. Across from him, the countless sword phantoms instantly converged, submerging into a person's body. His sword was unsheathed at a foot, his eyes cold and firm. His gaze fell on Ruan Jing, and he said, "You were defeated by someone?" His voice was cold and hard. It was clear he wasn't good with words, but one could clearly sense the surprise in his voice. Ruan Jing nodded. A strange fellow. I've never seen him before. He was very strong. He pulled out a book from his waist and patted it. No, he was very strong. The sword cultivator's eyes brightened. He and Ruan Jing were old acquaintances, and they even had some friendship. Otherwise, the battle just now wouldn't have ended so easily. Of course, it wasn't that their friendship was so deep that they could reconcile after falling out. The main reason was that neither of them could do anything to the other. Even if they fought, it would only be a waste of time and energy. But the sword cultivator had a deep understanding of Ruan Jing. This was a person who seemed gentle and elegant on the outside, but was actually a madman on the inside. And a madman was usually a mixture of pride and ruthlessness. Ruan Jing was especially so. To be able to defeat Ruan Jing and still be able to retreat unscathed, and even make him not dare to directly attack. This was absolutely a powerhouse. Sword player, let's cooperate. Ruan Jing smiled. If I am alone, I don't have the confidence to deal with Qin Yu. Oh, Qin Yu is the fellow I just mentioned. As a direct disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect, he was known as a genius of the sword that only appeared once every 10,000 years. If anyone else dared to call Ling Xiao this, they would surely die a miserable death. But Ruan Jing had always called him this from the very beginning. The reason he could still jump around and even make Ling Xiao ignore him was because he was strong enough and his background was deep enough. Xiangzhang Academy's name wasn't too resounding, but its strength was terrifying. It had been passed down for countless years and had always been on par with the Heavenly Sword sect. Not interested, Ling Xiao turned and walked away. Ruan Jing loudly said, I know you are proud and you always kill people yourself, but this time is different. I am very interested in the woman on Qin Yu's back. He coughed. Of course, it's not because of that, but because it is related to this mystic realm. Ling Xiao turned. Really? Ruan Jing said, Of course. If it weren't for that, why would I provoke Qin Yu when I know he is tyrannically strong? Ling Xiao fell silent. When he killed people, no matter how weak or strong the enemy was, he would always cut off their heads with his sword. This was his choice and also his way of the sword. Teaming up with others didn't go against his original intentions. But he certainly knew what was special about Ruan Jing. When one cultivated Xiangzhang Academy's Skyheart insight to large success, they could communicate with the heavens and earth and obtain all sorts of mysterious hints. Ruan Jing must have received a warning from the heavens and earth that he shouldn't be enemies with Qin Yu. Thus he came to cooperate with him. Ling Xiao looked up. I will kill him. You capture that woman. Ruan Jing smiled. I knew you would say that. No problem. Afterwards, we will play a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide the profits. Okay. Unbeknownst to everyone else, Qin Yu finally arrived at the place that the crystal heart pointed him to. It was a mountain. When Qin Yu saw its appearance, he was stunned. This was because its appearance was exactly the same as the carrier of the mystic realm in the land of chaos. It was also a stalactite-like mountain. Its surface was incomparably smooth, forming a sharp contrast with the surrounding lush forests. When Qin Yu saw this mountain, he couldn't help but think, could it be that the one who entered today was a realm within a realm? This sort of situation also existed in the land of chaos. But not only were they few in number, but the level of the mystic realm wasn't high either. The reason was simple. The existence of a realm within a realm had extremely strict requirements. The higher the level of the mystic realm, the greater the strength it contained and the more difficult it was to form. But if it really was a realm within a realm, then Qin Yu would have to seriously consider the degree of danger in this mystic realm. Several gazes fell on Qin Yu from afar, cold and indifferent. There was also a bit of unconcealable surprise in their eyes. Those that could come here were mostly cultivators from the third floor of the ship. Even if they didn't know each other, they had at least met each other before and knew some information about each other. But Qin Yu was clearly not one of them. In particular, he was carrying the unconscious Master Yun on his back. This caused the gazes that fell on him to become even more strange. Qin Yu had already sensed these gazes. He was well aware that he wasn't the first person to arrive here. But since these people only watched from afar and didn't have any intention of provoking him, Qin Yu was happy to have some peace and quiet. In this current situation, it was unknown what would happen in the end. Preserving his strength was certainly the best choice. Qin Yu's figure flickered, and he landed on a thick ancient tree. He chose a spacious area, untied Master Yun, and sat down cross-legged beside him. Qin Yu had already memorized the aura of the fire-bathing lineage. None of the cultivators here were from it. They hadn't arrived yet. This was also good. Chinyu could make some more preparations. In addition to this, his chances of success would be higher. It was just that there were many cultivators here, and none of them were easy to deal with. How to deal with them was also a problem. It would be best if he could fish in troubled waters. Otherwise, after a great battle, he would become the cicada in the mouth of the oriole. In the blink of an eye, a day passed. Several more waves of cultivators arrived. As they saw the mountain outside, their complexions changed. Chinyu casually swept his eyes over them. Since he couldn't find his target, he simply ignored them. At this moment, the unconscious Yun suddenly began writhing about, and groans of agony escaped from his mouth. Between her eyebrows, the dark moon and crimson sun slowed down, showing signs of instability. Chinyu's complexion changed. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his arms, his sharp eyes sweeping around. The reason Master Yun's bloodline backlash had suddenly intensified was likely because she was influenced by external factors. Rumble, rumble. In the next moment, there was the sound of breaking air. A sharp light flashed in Chinyu's eyes. In the skies, a blazing flame came howling down like a meteor. With just a glance, Chinyu knew that the cultivator in this flame was the one he was waiting for. He was originally worried that this person would restrain his aura, but now it seemed he had been worrying too much. As long as he killed this person and fused with his bloodline, Master Yun would be able to survive. The flames fell to the ground. The earth rumbled and sunk in. Scorched earth splashed out in all directions, and the temperature in the air rapidly rose. The bald burning wind walked out from the pit. As if sensing something, he turned to look at Chinyu. Their gazes collided in the air. Chapter 1182. There were no sparks flying in all directions, nor were there any tit-for-tat confrontations. Flaming Wind and Chinyu looked at each other for several breaths of time before withdrawing their gazes. But through this glance, Chinyu was able to determine one thing. Burning Wind had already sensed some sort of aura from Master Yun's body. Most likely, it had something to do with the sudden agitation of the berserk bloodline in Yunshi's body. Most likely, it was due to the resonance between the two bloodlines. This was unexpected, but perhaps it was because of the shielding effects of the dark moon and crimson sun that Burning Wind didn't sense his complete aura, or perhaps it was because he dreaded Chinyu's existence. For the time being, nothing happened between the two sides. But once there was a chance, Chinyu believed that Burning Wind would definitely make a move. Sure enough, plans couldn't keep up with changes. After this matter, it was impossible for Chinyu to scheme against him. However, this was how the world was. Not everything would progress according to your expectations. There would always be changes and accidents. If he could accept it, he would accept it. If he couldn't, he could only accept it. Chinyu couldn't help but feel a bit helpless, but he soon composed himself. Since the situation had changed, he had to change his previous strategy. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to save Yunshi. On the other hand, Yunshi was likely to be the key to suppressing the primordial spirit of the myriad anthive nest. Flaming Wind of the lineage of fire looked into Chinyu's eyes, and it did not escape the eyes of the surrounding cultivators. When they saw the two of them avert their gazes, they immediately felt disappointed. There were too many opponents, and the treasures in the mystic realm were destined to be limited. Of course, they would be happy to see a few of them being eliminated in a fight to the death. Unfortunately, they weren't stupid, and they wouldn't allow others to take advantage of them. At this moment, they did not know that the disappointment in their hearts would soon be dispelled. Even Chinyu didn't expect that just as he was thinking about how he could kill this Baldy and save Master Yin, someone would already want his life. Whoosh, the sound of air being torn apart could be heard. The vast and endless sword shadows appeared at the end of one's line of sight. Their speed was astonishing, and their auras were monstrous. Heaven-reaching sword cultivator. Outside the secret realm, a cultivator released a low roar, his face revealing restraining fear. In terms of battle prowess, sword cultivators were definitely one of the strongest existences among cultivators. On the other hand, the heavenly sword Dao emphasized on killing with a single strike. It was the most ruthless and overbearing, taking the life of a person with a single strike. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, there were very few cultivators that were willing to provoke a heaven-piercing sword cultivator that could take one's life. Qin Yu. Suddenly, a cold shout came from the endless sword shadows. Burning Wind's heart stirred. Without any reason, he subconsciously looked up and his eyes fell on Qin Yu. His intuition told him that Ling Zhao's target was this person. Bang! Torrential sword shadows slashed down brazenly. The extremely sharp sword intent swept out majestically, as if it was going to split the secret realm itself. Ranfeng's eyes were bright. It really was him. Qin Yu lifted a hand and punched out. Wherever his fist landed, space twisted. It was like a boulder had fallen into a lake, causing turbulent waves to surge. It charged out in all directions, wrapping up the numerous sword shadows that were slashing down on him. The sword shadow collided with the distorted space, and a low rumbling sound rang out continuously. It was like thunder exploding in the depths of the earth, causing people's hearts to tremble. Ling Zhao's figure appeared. As he looked at Qin Yu, who was withdrawing his fist atop the ancient tree, a fierce fighting spirit surged in his eyes. You really are strong. Although his previous sword strike was meant to probe, it was still full of murderous intent. Even an original God Realm cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand it easily. Qin Yu hurriedly attacked. His fist shook the void, forming waves that swallowed all. Just this strike alone was extraordinary. Who are you? Heaven-span sword sex Ling Zhao. His tone was icy cold. He cupped his hands together. Please enlighten me. Bang! The sword in his hand left its sheath. The humming of the sword instantly reverberated through the world. Outside the secret realm, the scattered cultivators all stared with wide eyes. Their excitement couldn't be concealed. If the cultivators that entered the land of chaos were ranked according to their fame, then Ling Zhao's name wasn't in the top 3. But in terms of unparalleled combat strength and bloodthirsty killing intent, he was undoubtedly one of the most terrifying existences. After being chosen by Ling Zhao, no one was optimistic about Qin Yu's fate. This was the impression that the sword cultivators of Heaven-span Sword Sect had left on everyone through their glorious battle achievements. But they were still shaken. This was because Ling Zhao had drawn his sword. It had to be known that ever since Ling Zhao revealed his brilliance, the number of times he had drawn his sword could be counted on one hand. Every person that died beneath Ling Zhao's sword was an absolute powerhouse. But most of the time, it was only after the battle that Ling Zhao's fighting spirit was aroused that he drew his sword. But today, before the battle had even begun, Ling Zhao had already drawn his sword. Then there was only one explanation. His opponent was strong, so strong that even someone as arrogant as a Heaven-span Sword Sect cultivator had to bring out his full strength. Kill. Kill with everything you have. It would be best if both sides were wounded. As for why the two of them were fighting, no one knew, nor did they want to know. As long as the result was beneficial to them, it was fine. Qin Yu's complexion was ugly. It wasn't that he feared the sword cultivator in front of him, but that this inexplicable battle would ruin all of his plans. What was the reason? They had never met before, so why was Ling Zhao able to immediately call out his name and fight him without hesitation? For Ling Zhao to have his current cultivation, he definitely wasn't an idiot. Could it be that he didn't know that if he fought with Qin Yu right now, he would only be taken advantage of, unless there was enough benefit that he was willing to take the risk? Qin Yu's eyes fell on the unconscious Master Yun, and his complexion darkened. He coldly said, Ruan Jing, come out. With a chuckle, space twisted and a figure walked out. It was the blue-robed Ruan Jing, who held a scroll in his hand and had a gentle and elegant aura. As he looked at Qin Yu, his eyes were full of praise. Sir Qin is truly a smart person. I, Ruan Jing, like to make friends with smart people the most. If you are willing to agree to our previous transaction, we can immediately bury the hatchet and become a legend. What does Sir Qin think? It really was him. Qin Yu felt a bit of regret. If he knew this would happen, he would have taken the risk to kill this person on the spot the first time they met. Today, he had joined forces with the Heavenspan Sword Sect cultivators. Perhaps things were about to spiral out of control. Agreeing was impossible. A ruthless light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. If this was the case, then he could only take a risk. Bang! In response to Ruan Jing, Qin Yu roared out and punched out. The phantom of void abyss titan appeared behind him, rearing its head back and roaring. Ruan Jing's complexion changed. He crossed his arms and placed a scroll in front of him. In the next moment, a terrifying explosion erupted. A golden page flew out from the scroll. It combusted on its own, leaving behind surging blue words. Space collapsed, and Ruan Jing was sent flying away. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with anger. He had indeed felt an intense threat from Qin Yu. Otherwise, he wouldn't have avoided him on his own initiative. But today, the might of this punch had far surpassed his expectations. It had actually forced the Academy's supreme treasure to damage a page in order to protect him. Bang! The long sword roared. Ling Xiao walked forwards without expression. Qin Yu, your opponent is me. He raised his hand and slashed out with his sword. There was no change in space, but an extremely strange and terrifying feeling welled up in the hearts of all the cultivators who witnessed this sword. It was as if, as his sword fell, everything would be cut open and neatly split in half. Or even themselves. The moment this thought appeared, a trace of fear exploded in their hearts. They subconsciously took a step back, and all the cultivators revealed looks of horror. What a terrifying sword strike! Burning Wind had a dignified expression. The depths of his eyes were crimson red, as if countless flames were burning within them. From this sword strike, he could feel a near-fatal threat. Sky-piercing sword cultivator. He truly lived up to his reputation. This person would be one of his most terrifying opponents in the mystic realm. Could this be an opportunity? After Ling Xiao killed Qin Yu, he would inevitably fall into a weakened state because of the loss. Burning Wind remained calm. The flames burning in his eyes quietly blazed even hotter. That's right, in the eyes of the descendants of the fire-bathing lineage, it was only natural for the sky-piercing sword cultivator who had slashed out such a terrifying sword strike to kill Qin Yu. Even if he was strong enough, this was because the level of this sword strike had risen to a boundary that near the Tao. It was because of this that everyone who saw it felt such a terrifying feeling. Their strength might be equal, but the disparity in boundary could produce an astonishing eruption of strength. How could Qin Yu not die? It wasn't just Burning Wind who thought this. At this time, outside of the mystic realm, nearly every cultivator had the same thought. But Ling Xiao was an exception. This was the sky-piercing sword cultivator who had personally slashed out a terrifying sword strike and shocked the minds of all cultivators. As he looked at Qin Yu across from him, he didn't know why he didn't relax at all. Instead, as this sword slashed out, his mind became increasingly solemn, and there was even an invisible feeling of being suppressed. This sort of feeling was something he had never felt ever since he had glimpsed the gate and stepped into the path of the sword. Qin Yu attacked. Facing the sword strike that could pierce through all he did was raise his hand and point forwards. In the abyss, Qin Yu viewed the world. He saw the skies of the abyss and also the source of the abyss. Of course, he wasn't Liao Shi and he couldn't see clearly. But this didn't mean he didn't gain anything. He entered the deepest depths of the abyss, passed through the terrifying cold sea, entered the all-destroying vortex, and found light born in its depths. Then he found a passage back to Vast Yang. In that passage, Qin Yu was placed between two great worlds. He was imprisoned by light and darkness, and he comprehended light and darkness as one. However, he didn't tell anyone that when he understood light and darkness, another terrifying thought emerged uncontrollably from the bottom of his heart. Vast Yang and the abyss, these two opposing worlds, just what sort of relationship did they have? If any cultivator who knew of the existence of Vast Yang and the Abyss were to learn of this, they would surely regard Qin Yu as a madman. These were two completely opposing worlds, their attributes like fire and water. Of course, they could only be mortal enemies. But reality told Qin Yu that the thought that appeared in his mind was likely true. This was because what he obtained from observing the world in the Abyss was still effective even after returning to Vastion. He could even feel that beneath the surface of the two worlds, there was an essential similarity between them. Of course, it wasn't completely the same, but to the current Qin Yu, it was more than enough. If a sword strike from a heaven-span sword cultivator could be said to be incomparably terrifying, as if all living things in the world would be cut to pieces, then Qin Yu's finger was absolutely ruthless and terrifying. Then, this finger of Qin Yu's was absolutely ruthless and terrifying. It could strike everything into the abyss of annihilation. As his fingertip fell, a clear fingerprint appeared in space. It shattered space, turning it pitch black. Then, with this fingerprint as the center, cracks spread out in all directions. Then, an incomparably horrifying scene appeared. Space began to break apart, and this wasn't a small area. Like a mirror falling to the ground, it instantly shattered into countless pieces, forming a black space storm. It roared out like a broken dam. The spatial fragments wrapped around it were like pieces of ice, roaring out together with it, tearing everything to pieces. Qin Yu had a finger. Its name was the Azure Point. It could summon the wind and rain. It could summon heroic spirits. It could change the world. But in the end, this finger had transformed into a secret art of the Tao of space. Or, to be more precise, it was a slaughter art of the Tao of space. Perhaps in terms of pure strength, the Azure Point finger wasn't too powerful. But what it touched upon was the space laws that existed in all things. Thus, there was the horrifying scene of Qin Yu pointing out his finger and space shattering with a roar like a broken dam. A terrifying sword strike that could split apart the heavens, and Earth sank into the space storm. Heaven-shaking rumbles echoed out before everything finally calmed down. It wasn't that the power of the space storm could easily destroy it, but that this terrifying sword strike had been banished by the space laws. Perhaps it had appeared in another distant world, releasing the remnants of its terrifying might. But this no longer had anything to do with Qin Yu. At this moment, the world fell silent. Countless pairs of eyes locked on Qin Yu, their eyes wide with shock and horror. It was like they had seen a ghost. Of the cultivators that could appear here, none of them were mediocre. In fact, they could even be called outstanding elites. They didn't lack in strength or vision. They certainly knew what Qin Yu's strike represented, the space laws. They were known to be second only to the Tao of Time, a great Tao with unparalleled might. Vast Yang contained countless worlds, large and small like a chessboard. They were like islands dotting the vast sea. The divine realm cultivators within were like grains of sand in the eternal sea. They all had the qualifications to cultivate the great Tao of rules, but how many of them could touch upon the space laws? Let alone divine realm cultivators. Even formidable original divinity realm cultivators that could perceive the space laws were extremely rare. But there was one thing that was without a doubt. Any cultivator that could perceive the space laws would be far stronger than those at the same level, and they would also have enviable potential. Today, it could be said that proud children of heaven had gathered in this mystic realm, but none of them were lucky enough to be able to control the power of space. How could anyone not be shocked? Space laws? In the void world, one of the several figures spoke out, his voice shaking. When one cultivated to their level, when there was no way forward, they began to understand just how terrifying the space and time laws were. Most importantly, besides great power, the space and time laws represented a kind of future potential. The Tao of Time was ethereal. Besides rulers, almost no one could control it. As for the space great Tao, the several gathered here were only at the beginning, and this was because they had the help of their realms. They were able to connect with the heavens and earth, slowly accumulating their gains. It was completely different from directly comprehending it. There's almost no potential for growth, and it would be difficult to advance in the future. Everyone, if you hand this person to me, I am willing to withdraw from today's struggle, a figure slowly said. Just as he finished speaking, there was a cold laugh in everyone's ears. Venerable Xian's plan is quite good. Does he think that we don't know the value of the space laws? The spirit bodies of the profound, bright world, even if they fully mature, cannot compare to the space laws in terms of value. The void world fell silent. No one spoke, but their eyes were filled with heat. Chapter 1183. Qin Yu didn't know that because of the azure finger, many eyes had locked onto him, and he had triggered the greatest crisis of his life. If he didn't handle this matter properly, what awaited him would be an incomparably miserable fate. Of course, this was all in the future. Right now, as he stared at the sword cultivator across from him, he could feel fear in his eyes. Even someone as strong as the sword cultivator with a firm was intimidated by the power of space that Qin Yu erupted with. The other cultivators couldn't avoid it. And this was Qin Yu's goal. In order to seal away Master Yun's aura and extend her life, he was far from his peak condition. Once he fell into a fierce battle with the sword cultivator, there was a high chance of complications occurring. Moreover, there was also Xiangzhang Academy's Ruan Jing, who was watching from the side. From how he gathered the sword cultivator to join forces with him, one could see this person's character. He was absolutely capable of bullying others with numbers. In order to intimidate everyone, they wouldn't dare to recklessly attack. As long as he could persist until his soul manifested in the mystic realm, everyone's attention would be diverted away. In normal circumstances, Qin Yu's plan had a high chance of success. It could even be said that with things having reached this step, he was already halfway to success. But what he didn't know was that many years ago, because of an accidental harvest, Ruan Jing had also touched upon the surface of the space laws. Since it was only the surface, it was extremely shallow and couldn't provide any substantial help to his strength. But the space laws were the space laws. After this matter was confirmed, it was immediately sealed off, and Ruan Jing became one of the core disciples of Xiangzhang Academy. It was only by pouring resources into his cultivation that he had his current cultivation. The only regret was that Ruan Jing's space laws were obtained through an external object. Although he had diligently cultivated them these past years, he hadn't been able to cross the threshold. Even he himself, as the years passed, gradually gave up on his ambition to truly control the space laws. But now, in Qin Yu's battle with Ling Xiao, Ruan Jing actually saw a strike of the space laws. In that moment, as everyone fell into a state of shock, a flame ignited in his heart, crazily burning his mind. Kill Qin Yu and take away his space laws. If it were anyone else, it would be nearly impossible to succeed. But Ruan Jing had a chance. Even if the chances weren't high, it was enough for Ruan Jing to risk everything. So, as Qin Yu awed all the cultivators outside the mountain, Ruan Jing brazenly attacked. His target was Qin Yu, but his target was the unconscious Yunshi. Qin Yu valued her enough to be a powerful bargaining chip. It would be difficult for him to kill Qin Yu by himself, but there was no lack of powerhouses here, and the premise was that he needed enough benefits to drive them to surround and kill Qin Yu. After all, if he wasn't able to kill an enemy that had grasped the laws of space today, then it would definitely become a great calamity for him in the future. Yunshi was the key. Bang! Space suddenly collapsed, swallowing Master Yun within. Before Qin Yu could even react in anger, Ruan Jing actually dared to move. She thrust a hand in and pulled Master Yun out. In front of a cultivator who had grasped the laws of space, using spatial means to capture someone was naturally an extremely foolish thing to do. But in reality, Ruan Jing had done it on purpose. He only wanted to attract the attention of the crowd, not to capture Master Yin. Everyone, Ruan Jing swears on the honor of Zhang Academy that this woman beside Qin Yu is hiding an enormous secret on her body. It is something that you and I both want to obtain in this mystic realm. If we don't take this woman away or kill her, then we're destined to gain nothing in this secret realm. everyone's complexions changed. He swore on the honor of Zhang Academy that Ruan Jing wouldn't dare to speak nonsense. Otherwise, even he wouldn't be able to withstand the consequences. And more importantly, besides this possibility, no one could figure out why Ruan Jing would act at this time. After all, everyone had witnessed Qin use strength with their own eyes. Unless he had nowhere else to retreat, he had no other choice. Most cultivators didn't understand why this trip to the land of chaos had attracted so many famous young powerhouses. But in the end, there were some people who knew some inside information. And what was even more coincidental was that almost everyone who knew was gathered here. Thinking back to the strict instructions they had received before leaving, it was easy for them to understand. Ruan Jing must have made some sort of promise or obtained the promise of some great figure. Only then would he be willing to take such a risk. With this as a background, everyone believed most of Ruan Jing's words. If this wasn't the case, then why would Qin Yu keep bringing an unconscious woman with him? He must have known about it. Then, everyone's eyes turned dignified. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. He hadn't hesitated to expose the space laws to intimidate everyone. But if it involved his own interests, then that was a different test. None of these people in front of him dared to face him alone. But what if they joined forces? The space laws were strong, but they weren't strong enough to completely roll over them. And as he thought, Qin Yu could feel a trace of eagerness in the dignified eyes of those around him. If they didn't have something as profound as the space laws, then why would he have it? This involved some dark thoughts, but they still existed. Moreover, they were one of the most important factors influencing everyone's decision. Ruan Jing was well aware that everyone was tempted. The only thing they lacked now was a turning point. Just as he was secretly clenching his teeth, not hesitating to take the risk of being the first to attack and surround Qin Yu, someone else spoke up. This voice was cold and gloomy. Qin Yu, you actually dared to kill someone from my Sly Fate clan. No matter who you are, you must die. Traces of blood-red light gushed out from nothingness, circling around Qin Yu. They constantly twisted, condensing into fierce ghost faces. On the back of Qin Yu's hand, the blood mole that had shrunk to a point was activated. Countless blood runes drilled out and wildly spread outwards. At the same time, a horrifying feeling erupted from the depths of his heart. In the next moment, an extremely cold aura exploded in his soul, like howling ice blades. They wanted to cut Qin Yu's soul into countless pieces and sever all his life force. With a stuffy cough, Qin Yu's complexion paled. He spat out a mouthful of blood and punched out. His fist collided with the palm that drilled out from space. There was a stuffy cough, and an explosion occurred. The pale-faced hooking soul was sent tumbling backwards. He stared at Qin Yu, shock in his eyes. Soul treasure. The strength that broke into Qin Yu's soul only erupted for a moment before it lost contact with him. Hooking soul licked his lips, his tongue turning even redder. Ruan Jing, let's join forces to kill him. I only want this treasure. The Sly Fate clan was known to control the fate of life and death. And all of this was established on the basis that one had a sufficiently powerful soul. If he could obtain the soul treasure in Qin Yu's hands, Hooking Soul was confident his strength would rise to another level in a short period of time. He might even be able to touch upon the Yama King realm. I don't care who the soul treasure belongs to. But, fellow Taoist Qin Yu, you must explain why the woman beside you has the bloodline of my fire-bathing clan flowing through her body. The bald burning wind stepped forwards, staring at Master Yun in Qin Yu's arms. Because she had been ambushed by the Sly Fate clan soul-severing technique just now, there had been a pause in the supply of strength, and the revolving of the dark moon and crimson sun had also stopped. Although she had quickly recovered, there was still a trace of her aura that burning wind had captured. He was finally able to determine that the aura he felt in that mountain valley that day was that of Master Yin. And Qin Yu was that mysterious and unknown powerhouse. The situation suddenly reversed. From the moment Ruan Jing attacked, in a short period of time, 3 cultivators had stepped forward in front of Qin Yu. Xiangzhang Academy's Ruan Jing, Sly Fate clan's Hooking Soul, fire-bathing lineage's burning wind. If one were to be added on top of the sky-split sword sex Ling Xiao, who had cooperated with Ruan Jing, then nearly all of the peak powerhouses here had taken action. The atmosphere changed once more. Qin Yu was strong, but no matter how strong he was, there was absolutely no way he could contend with 4 proud sons of heaven joining forces. In other words, there was a high probability that today he would die. As the saying went, when a wall was down, everyone would push on it. When a broken drum would be beaten by others. Everyone that originally had a bit of fear in their hearts now had icy coldness appear in their eyes. In the end, killing Qin Yu was in line with everyone's interests. Feeling the icy gazes on him, Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He never expected that the situation would develop to this step. Even if he risked his life, he didn't think he could contend with these people in front of him. Even if he could kill a few of them, it would be hard for him to escape death in the end. The voice of the old turtle suddenly sounded out in his mind. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He stepped forwards and laughed. This sudden action left everyone startled. They didn't know what Qin Yu meant, and their movements paused for a moment. It looks like everyone has made up their mind to surround and kill me today. Then bring it on. Qin Yu's laughter faded. He roared out loud. I certainly cannot kill everyone here today. But dragging a few people to the grave with me isn't difficult at all. Killing intent overflowed in all directions. From these words, everyone could feel an incomparably thick and nearly tangible blood stench. Their complexions changed once more. Even Burning Wind and Hooking Soul, who were standing in front, subconsciously shrank their pupils, revealing a trace of vigilance. Moreover, no matter what background Qin Yu came from, for his cultivation to reach his current level, he inevitably had a stroke of luck. Who knew what cards he had in his hands? On the surface, it looked like he was at a disadvantage, and there was no way he could escape from being surrounded and killed. But if he really was in a hopeless situation, it was hard to say whether or not he would be dragged down with him. In particular, it was because of their stance that the situation had worsened, causing Qin Yu to end up in his current state. If he had to say who he hated the most, it would be them. Ruan Jing cursed inwardly. This group of fellows had actually been frightened by Qin Yu's crude methods. If everyone joined forces to kill him, just how many methods could Qin Yu use? Before he could even counterattack, he would be killed on the spot. He took a deep breath. Just as he was about to wake everyone up, he saw Qin Yu suddenly lift a hand and point a finger at him. Ruan Jing had personally witnessed the might of the boundless blue finger and the chaotic flows of space that it caused. The more he envied it, the more he feared it. His complexion changed, and he stormed backwards. But everything remained calm, as if nothing had happened. Qin Yu had simply pointed at him. Ruan Jing's face alternated between white and blue. Qin Yu lightly said, I'll remember you. Ruan Jing's complexion changed. This is bad. He wants to escape. His reaction was quick, but it was already too late. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a cold sneer. As he spoke, he had already rushed out. Contrary to everyone's expectations, he didn't flee. Instead, he carried Master Cloud on his back and flew towards the mountain and the sea. Gotcha! A crack appeared on the surface of the mountain. Qin Yu and Master Cloud instantly submerged within. Chapter 1184. Before this, Qin Yu was worried that if he really was in a boundary within a boundary, then he would have to reevaluate the dangers and be more careful. But when he was sure of this, he was the first to enter the realm within the realm when it first opened. This was the so-called ever-changing affairs of the world. After all, if he hadn't rushed in, he wouldn't have been far from death. The moment he flew into the crack, Qin Yu had made countless assumptions about what would happen next. But he never expected that what awaited him would be a blow to the head. There was a buzzing sound in his head, like it was wrapped in several layers of cloth and pressed down by a large stone. It was heavy and oppressive. This was a suppression on the level of the soul, forcing all of his senses back into his body. Before Qin Yu could adapt to this discomfort, there was a light pop, and he felt as if he had landed on solid ground. He had already entered. A moment later, Qin Yu was able to determine that he was in a maze. That's right, this was a maze. At this time, Yu was standing at a turning point in a passage. This passage branched off into countless forks, each one going in a different direction. And Yu had made similar choices several times before. Every fork looked the same on the surface. In a situation where his divine sense couldn't leave his body, he could only rely on his eyes and intuition. Or, to put it more bluntly, he relied on luck. This was because what the eyes could see wasn't necessarily correct. Moreover, these passages weren't straight but curved. What the naked eye could see was only a small distance. Which direction should he go? Yu looked around but didn't find anything. Since there was no way to choose, he could only follow his intuition. But this time, his intuition was wrong. Not long after entering the passage, Yu heard a light, buzzing sound in his ears. His complexion changed. Without hesitation, he exerted strength in his feet, and his speed instantly rose. In the next moment, where Yu was originally standing, the walls of the passage cracked open. Dark yellow mosquitoes with dark red eyes rushed out. They indeed looked like mosquitoes, but their bodies had expanded dozens of times. Each one was the size of an adult's fist, and they had long and sharp mouth parts that flashed with an icy cold light. Pairs of dark red eyes locked onto the wildly running Yu. Their eyes were ice cold, and their killing intent nearly condensed into essence. Their wings rapidly flapped, humming in the air. The mosquitoes rushed out like lightning. Yu soon discovered that with his current speed, it was impossible for him to escape. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He stepped forwards, causing the tunnel to shake. But it was unknown just what sort of material it was made of, but it didn't shatter under Yu's attack. In fact, there wasn't even a crack on it. But this didn't mean that Yu's kick was ineffective. Rather, it caused the might of this strike to be greatly enhanced. The force that entered the passageway was rebounded, hitting the other side of the passageway, forming a second rebound, then a third, a fourth. Although the force would be weakened with each rebound, its power was still considerable. This gave rise to many intersecting and shaking waves in the tunnel, swallowing up all the flying mosquitoes that were chasing him. As it turned out, mosquitoes were just mosquitoes. Even if their bodies expanded dozens of times, they still couldn't get rid of their weak nature. In the blink of an eye, countless flying mosquitoes were smashed into pieces by the shockwaves. The smell of blood permeated the air. Surprise flashed in his eyes. The strength of these mosquitoes was far weaker than he had imagined, but he could clearly feel a threat from them. Otherwise, when he heard the buzzing sound, he wouldn't have accelerated to escape without hesitation. If it was only at this level, then what did it matter if there were 10 times more of them? He could easily take them all in with a few punches and kicks. But soon, Yu's complexion changed. This was because the smell of blood in the air was rapidly weakening. Not only that, but the scarlet color that filled the air was also rapidly fading, as if it was being absorbed by something. Then, there was a series of muffled pu sounds, like the sound of a long knife that was not very sharp cutting in a thick cowhide, revealing a sense of difficulty. There was nothing in the tunnel except for the flying mosquitoes that were chasing him. This sound was naturally the sound of the shock waves tearing them apart. But this sound hadn't been there before. In other words, in a short period of time, the physical strength of these flying mosquitoes had increased at an astonishing rate. Thinking about the disappearance of the smell of blood and blood in the air, Yu's pupils shrank. If this was really the case, then he was in great trouble. Reality proved that Yu's premonition was correct. He was indeed in trouble. When the blood energy that filled the tunnel disappeared, the number of flying mosquitoes was reduced by over half. But the ones that survived had undergone tremendous changes. Their bodies didn't swell, but countless blood-red lines appeared on their earthen yellow outer shell, perhaps because they had absorbed the blood energy. Their dark red eyes were much more spirited than before, and the icy coldness within them was much thicker. Their wings flapped even faster. They left behind afterimages as they crazily rushed towards Yu. Fear of death, that didn't exist. It was as if they didn't know that there was such an emotion as fear in this world. Although he had already determined that the more he killed them, the stronger the remaining flying mosquitoes would become, his intuition told him that he absolutely couldn't let them approach him. The best method was to find a way to get rid of them. He lifted a hand and punched out. Then, without any pause, Chinyu punched out a second time, a third time. Wild strength erupted like a volcano, sweeping through the entire tunnel and submerging the flying mosquitoes. After finishing this, Chinyu didn't pause at all. He didn't even look at the damage caused by these 3 punches. He turned and walked away, raising his speed to the limit. The rumbling sounds behind him and the howling of the flying mosquitoes soon vanished from sight. But Chinyu didn't dare to be careless. He passed through 3 more turning points and entered a tunnel that he didn't even know the direction of. Only then did he relax a little. It seemed that his plan had succeeded. Otherwise, if he were to be entangled here, who knew just how terrifying those flying mosquitoes would become in the end? As he thought of their sharp mouths, Chinyu's forehead tightened. He shook his head, dispelling the horrifying images in his mind. He couldn't let his imagination run wild. What if it came true later? He arrived at another turning point. Chinyu stopped. His eyes swept around, and he suddenly frowned. The number of forks had decreased. Even though he had walked all the way here, all the passages were the same, and he couldn't make any effective distinctions. But Chinyu continued to calculate. Before this, the number of forks he had passed through had been between 9 and 12, never exceeding this range. But now, Chinyu had counted 3 times and determined that he wasn't seeing things. There were only 7 passages. Did this mean that he had stumbled into the next level of the maze? The decrease in the number of passages meant that the range of choices had shrunk. Besides that, what else was there? After hesitating for a moment, Chinyu helplessly sighed. Besides the decrease in number, everything else was the same. Then he could only use the old method and rely on his intuition and luck. The flying mosquitoes experience made Chinyu realize that his luck was only average. Should he do the opposite? If he chose the worst one, then perhaps he would be fine. In the end, Chinyu chose the passage that he felt was the safest and the least problematic. There was nothing he could do about it. He looked at the passage several times and felt that it was the worst, but he wasn't in the mood to enter it. But this time, Chinyu seemed to have chosen the right one. The passage was safe, at least for the time being. As a meticulous and cautious person who didn't miss out on details, Chinyu certainly wouldn't forget to calculate the length of the passage. If the number of passages decreased and the length didn't change, then he would soon arrive at the next turning point. Sure enough, the turning point appeared at the end of his line of sight. Chinyu revealed a gratified expression. People had to believe in themselves. He had to remember this in the future. Chinyu's figure rushed out of the passage and entered the turning point. His previous experience told him that while the inside of the maze was dangerous, it should be safe here. Before Chinyu could relax a bit, he suddenly tensed up. At this turning point, there was actually something else, a statue. Or, it was more accurate to say that it was a tall and mighty figure. It wore armor and held a large saber in its hand, and its appearance was dignified and dignified. As Chinyu looked at it, the statue blinked and said, "I never thought that someone would arrive here so quickly. Moreover, it doesn't seem like he's injured at all. Boy, your luck is quite good." Chinyu's expression was wooden. He really didn't know what to say. This was clearly a statue in front of him, without the slightest trace of life. Chinyu was certain of this. But now, not only was he speaking, but his expression had also become lively, as if he were amazed. What the hell? The statue lightly coughed and moved its body. With cracking sounds, it took several steps back and forth. As you can see, I am a statue, not a ghost. After saying that, he raised his hand and rubbed his chin. His knuckles rubbed against his chin, making cracking sounds. However, strictly speaking, I'm no different from a ghost. Living in this place, I'm afraid I'm more miserable than a ghost. Chinyu took a deep breath. "Your Excellency." Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. The statue took out a large saber that shined with a cold light. "Don't ask. Even if you ask, I can't tell you. Since we've come here, Either I chop you to death, or you destroy me. Only one of us can survive. Even though I've been tired of living for a long time, I'm in a position where I have to take care of my own affairs. I can't just sit around and do nothing, right? I've said enough nonsense. Let's get started. After it finished speaking, it slashed out with its saber. Just now, as he watched the statue move, he had heard light cracking sounds that gave off a strange feeling. He originally thought that it wouldn't be too fast, but he discovered that he was wrong. Either the cracking sounds didn't affect it, or this thing was deliberately pretending. Its saber strike could not be described with just the word fast. If it weren't for Chinyu not relaxing his guard and instinctively taking a step back the moment it attacked, perhaps he would have lost half his head by now. Because his reaction was so fast, the tip of his nose almost touched the saber blade. An icy chill suddenly exploded in Chinyu's heart, causing his complexion to change. He had been numbed. Who would have thought that the statue warrior that had always been long-winded and didn't attack would suddenly attack so fiercely? Your reaction is quite fast, but this is only the first strike. The statue warrior laughed out loud. It didn't pause in the slightest as it pulled back its blade and pushed forward with a flip of its hand. From this push, you could feel the same feeling he had when he faced the heavenly sword Sexord, a feeling that was close to the Tao. A dead object could actually slash out such a terrifying saber strike. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed it. He drew back once more. The turning point wasn't too large, and not too far behind him was the passage. In just a breath of time, you would be able to enter. It was the same as when he faced the flying mosquito. If he didn't want to meet it head-on, he could just throw it off. Since this statue warrior had remained here the entire time, that meant it likely had a restricted range of movement. Whether or not this was true, Chinyu didn't have absolute confidence. But he would know once he tried. But before Chinyu could truly enter the passage, the statue warrior with terrifying saber skills suddenly said, "You guessed correctly. I cannot leave this place, but if you don't defeat me." Its lips curved up. "Then prepare to stay here and accompany me." Schwa. As Chinyu rapidly moved through the passage, he soon understood the meaning of the statue warrior's words. Looking at the end of the passage at the statue that was holding a saber and smiling at him, Chinyu's complexion paled. Chapter 1185. Your complexion is quite scary. If you don't want to face reality, then you can just turn around and run back. The statue warrior wickedly smiled. It waved the saber in its hands. In any case, I lack everything here but time. Chinyu turned and walked away. It was impossible for him to believe the statue warrior's words. But reality was always so cruel. It didn't give him any hope at all. Looking at the end of the passage and the statue warrior lazily sitting on the ground, Chinyu's heart sank. It seemed that this statue wasn't lying. He really was trapped in some sort of sealed ring. Unless he broke through the shackles, he wouldn't be able to leave. And the key to the shackles was this statue warrior in front of him. If he killed it, then he could break through it. Hey, what a coincidence, we meet again. The statue warrior slapped the saber in its hands, causing it to ring loudly. Have you calmed down yet? If you still haven't given up, then feel free to toss and turn around a bit more. I can patiently wait for you. At this point, it could be determined that his plan to escape had failed. Chinyu took a deep breath and stepped into the turning point. Without hesitation, he stepped forwards. You're serious? Haha, it's best if you can kill me. These days are just too boring. This was what the statue warrior said. It really did want to die, but it didn't hold back at all. Its saber instantly cut through the air. It wasn't that it didn't want to go easy on Chinyu, but that it couldn't do so. From the day it was born, this was the only will that had been engraved into its body. Thinking about it carefully, the statue warrior was in a pitiful state. Even if it wanted to die, it would have to meet someone stronger than it. Bang! The turning point wasn't very big, and suddenly there was a deafening roar. The deafening roar reverberated in the air. As Chinyu was fighting the statue warrior, the cultivators that followed behind him also fell into a chaotic melee. If Chinyu could see the situation these people were facing right now, he would be surprised to find that his luck was so good. All sorts of messy tricks that he hadn't encountered before were now blooming in the midst of these cultivators, beating them until they cried out for their parents. Those that cried out for their parents were the strong ones. This was because those with poor cultivations didn't even have time to cry out before they lost their lives. Of course people would die. Otherwise, wouldn't it ruin the great reputation of the boundary within the boundary? In the eyes of the crowd, this was normal. After entering the land of chaos, no matter how confident they were in themselves, they were more or less prepared to die here. That being said, some of the killer moves in the maze were too terrifying. Among them, the most terrifying were the two red mosquitoes that were the size of an adult's arm. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that these two beasts had skin of iron and bones of copper. They were immune to most normal attacks. In addition, the speed at which they flapped their wings was frighteningly fast. Basically, by the time you heard their buzzing sound, your heart would be deflated. Nearly half of the cultivators who died in the maze were killed by these two beasts. Their long and sharp mouthparts were enough to make one's face pale. It wasn't until the two flying mosquitoes locked onto Skirich Sword Cultivator that he met his match for the first time. The two sides fought fiercely. In this crisis, the Skirich Sword Cultivator slashed out a terrifying sword strike. Its might was even more terrifying than the sword strike he sent at Chinyu before. The flying mosquito that approached was cut in half, dying on the spot. The other flying mosquito was also cut in half. But no one imagined that the true horror had only just arrived. The dead flying mosquito's corpse exploded, turning into a mass of scarlet blood energy that howled out and wrapped around the severely wounded flying mosquito. After several breaths of time, when all of the blood energy was absorbed, the only remaining flying mosquito had transformed into a nearly crimson crystal. Soon, the Skirich Sword Cultivator ran away with a broken arm. Half of his body was withered, and he looked like a fierce ghost. After this battle, the blood crystal mosquitoes became a taboo existence in the maze. Every cultivator that saw them fled. Everyone was panic-stricken and gnashing their teeth. They definitely wouldn't have imagined that the blood crystal mosquitoes that they regarded as a nightmare were strictly speaking created by Chinyu. They had joined forces to kill Chinyu and forced him into the Middle Realm. But now, the bloody slaughter of the blood crystal mosquitoes had occurred. Perhaps this was fate. However, no matter how terrifying the blood crystal mosquitoes were, there were only a small minority of cultivators that encountered them. As time passed, they fumbled their way through the maze. There were always some lucky people that managed to break into the next level. In other words, there were fewer turning points where the passages diverged. Then, they discovered that the difficulty of surviving had suddenly risen to a whole new level. Groups of fearless puppets began to drill out from the passages. They wielded sabers, spears, swords, and halberds, all of them different. But their coordination was perfect. They were like an army that surrounded and beat up the cultivators that rushed in. They could only flee in panic like stray dogs. But there were also some people with similar luck as Chinyu. It wasn't long before they encountered a talkative statue that wielded an incomparably fierce saber. It was like they were locked in a cage. They could only desperately fight it, otherwise they wouldn't be able to go anywhere. Chinyu had come in earlier than them, and his luck was also better. Even though he hadn't realized this, he still hadn't realized it. But this was a fact. When most of these cultivators were chased around by the puppets, and a small number of lucky ones managed to encounter a saber-wielding statue, Chinyu's slaughter had already come to an end. The statue warrior was indeed fierce. Although it seemed fragile, the truth was that it possessed an extremely potent defensive ability. Chinyu pointed 3 times at the same place and tore open a wound on its chest. Then he punched out, widening the wound. The statue warrior's body broke in half, and its bright eyes dimmed. Of course, Chinyu also paid a price for this. There were 2 saber wounds on his body. Although his flesh was taut, traces of blood still seeped out, and his face paled. Space laws. The statue warrior threw away the saber in its hand and plopped down on the ground. It carefully straightened its broken body with its hands. I never thought that with your cultivation, you would be able to perceive such a supreme great Tao. Even if you die, it wouldn't be a loss. After coughing twice with difficulty, the statue warrior lowered its head and looked at itself. It adjusted its sitting posture to look even taller and mightier. Only then did it sigh in satisfaction. After that, its eyes flickered for a moment, then flickered again, and then completely extinguished. Hum! A tremor erupted from an inflection point. The surrounding scenery immediately changed. The seven forks merged into one, forming a single channel. Chinyu thought for a moment, and then cupped his hands together towards the statue warrior. 3 fingers struck the same spot. Although Chinyu had used the blue point finger that contained the space laws, with the statue warrior's strength, it wasn't necessarily impossible for it to dodge. After being struck 3 times in a row, perhaps in terms of strength erupting, it hadn't been lenient at all. It had left Chinyu with 2 terrifying saber wounds that were deep enough to break bones, causing his face to pale white. But there was still a bit of deliberate intent behind this. It really did want to die. The old turtle shadow shook. Of course, this wasn't his name, but that didn't matter. A name was only a symbol. Then, there was the statue warrior that had fallen completely silent in front of him. Strictly speaking, in Chinyu's not-too-short life, he had only encountered 2 existences that wished for death to arrive. Perhaps in their eyes, death was the only release. Kacha! Kacha! Cracks began to appear at the inflection point, constantly spreading outwards. Chinyu sighed. It really was impossible to stay here and recuperate. As the master of the maze, it was impossible for him to make such a low-level mistake. Chinyu turned and flew into the channel. Although he didn't know where it connected to, since it was the only way out, unless he wanted to stay here forever, he could only explore it himself. But this time, he discovered that his caution was meaningless. This was because the channel was extremely calm. After reaching the end, a grand courtyard appeared in front of him. Although it was peaceful and tranquil, standing in front of this courtyard, Chinyu revealed a dignified expression. Could this be the place where the soul bodies of the mystic realm resided? Had he already arrived at the core area of the maze? The wind blew and rustled the leaves, causing them to rustle against each other. Apart from that, there was only silence. This was true silence. Chinyu could clearly hear his own footsteps and the beating of his heart. Chapter 1186. There were stone lions in front of the courtyard, vivid and lifelike as if they were alive. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at the door, full of dignity and majesty. Chinyu glanced at them and couldn't help but take another look. He walked over and touched them, his complexion changing. A cultivator resonated with the world. After their magic power was used up, they needed to absorb heaven and earth's spiritual energy to recover. As one's boundary rose, the magic power within one's body became increasingly robust. Although the absorption speed increased, it still required a great deal of time to recover. If it was a daily cultivation, it wouldn't matter if it was a bit slow. But what if it was a battle? The speed at which one's magic power was restored could determine life or death. Thus, there were options outside of conventional methods to restore one's magic power. For instance, there were recovery pills and spirit stones. In fact, with Chinyu's current boundary, ordinary spirit stones were meaningless to him. The amount of spiritual energy contained within them was nothing more than a drop in the bucket compared to what he needed to restore his magic power. But this was only referring to ordinary quality. For instance, these 2 stone lions in front of him were made from a special material that Chinyu had never come into contact with before. They were also spirit stones. If they had to be divided into grades, they could be called peerless grade. The moment he touched them just now, Chinyu could clearly feel the pure and astonishing amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy contained within. According to Chinyu's calculations, just a palm-sized piece would be enough for him to restore all of his magic power. As for these 2 stone lions in front of him, he would likely be able to cut them into several hundred pieces. This was a massive amount of wealth, not to mention anything else. But with these 2 stone lions in hand, it would be extraordinarily difficult to exhaust Qin Yu's strength when he fought with his life on the line. As long as he could hold on, he could even exhaust his opponent to death. Good things, of course, they were good things. But such good things were placed right in front of him. Was this normal? Moreover, Qin Yu could sense no shackles or traps. These 2 stone lions. No, they should be called peerless great spirit stone lions. They seemed as if he could take them away as long as he stretched out his hand. This was like a meat pie falling from the heavens. Qin Yu glanced at the tightly shut door and took a deep breath to suppress his desires. This was a realm within a realm in the depths of the land of chaos. There was a mysterious and powerful soul hidden here. Who knew if there would be any problems? The 2 lions were placed here. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move. At the very least, he needed to investigate the condition of this courtyard. With this thought in mind, he walked to the door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. The courtyard door opened silently without any obstruction. A magnificent front courtyard appeared in his sight. But soon, Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to pay attention to the scenery, because he saw many, many treasures. At the entrance, just a few dozen feet away from him, there was an orchid in full bloom. A faint fragrance wafted out, stimulating his sense of smell. He subconsciously took a deep breath. He felt his spirits rise and his soul begin to stir. Then, an intense desire spread out from him. Although he didn't know what species this orchid was, there was no doubt that it was a powerful soul treasure. And this was just an extremely ordinary example within his field of vision. This was because there were many, many things similar to orchids. A blade of grass in the flower bed, a vine that climbed up the wall in the corner of the courtyard, and an unknown yellow flower that swayed gently in the wind on the rockery, all released an alluring aura. Qin Yu never imagined that as he focused his mind and pushed open the door, he would actually open a treasure trove. And right now, he was at the entrance of the treasure trove. The door was already open. As long as he wanted to, all of this would be his. Cultivators defied the heavens and changed their fate. They pursued to constantly become stronger, to contend with fate, and to walk out a wonderful life that belonged solely to them. And in the end, the degree of brilliance and the length of one's life was determined by one's cultivation. Thus, the pursuit of greater strength was an uncontrollable instinct of all cultivators. Now, facing the treasures in this courtyard, Qin Yu could clearly feel the powerful impact of this instinct. Even with Qin Yu's shrewdness, he still couldn't help but feel his throat go dry. A blazing light instinctively appeared in the depths of his eyes. There were no spells or traps. They were placed in front of him. He only needed to stretch out his hand, and he could reach them. Qin Yu could confirm that this wasn't an illusion. Everything he experienced was real. But why? Could it be that what he thought was true? Was this the lair of a powerful soul body within the boundary? Thus the reason there were these treasures? Even so, there shouldn't be no defenses. Or could it be that this soul body never imagined that someone would be able to break into this place? Qin Yu took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Something was wrong. He thought of the saber-wielding warrior that had died and turned into a statue. Its existence was clearly a test. As long as one passed through it, a channel would be opened and they would arrive here. In other words, everything was arranged by the master of the labyrinth. Could this courtyard be a reward for those who passed? Qin Yu rubbed between his eyebrows, bitterly smiling inwardly. This wasn't some kind of test where there would be a prize if he passed. Moreover, even if there was a reward, it was impossible for it to be generous to such a degree. It had to be known that what Qin Yu saw was only the stone lions outside the door and the front courtyard in front of him. The value of the treasures he saw left his heart trembling, nearly making it hard for him to control himself. But compared to the entire courtyard, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. It might not even occupy 1% of the entire courtyard. If the interior of this courtyard was the same as what he saw in front of him, just thinking about it caused Qin Yu's breathing to become rough. No, there was a problem. There had to be a problem here. You could feel his heart pounding in his chest. A sense of unease began to grow in his heart. There was no reason, it was just a powerful intuition. In fact, Yu wasn't the only one with this intuition. The old turtle suddenly said, "Master, it's best if you don't touch anything in this courtyard." Yu's eyes flashed. "Why?" The old turtle hesitated for a moment. "I don't know, but I feel like something is wrong." He paused for a moment. "Perhaps you could try to take one of them. I will carefully sense it." Yu thought for a moment. He walked over to the orchid. As he got closer, the fragrance it emitted became even richer. He subconsciously licked his lips. He reached out and grabbed the orchid, pulling it out with a bit of force. "Stop!" The old turtle screamed. Yu instantly let go and stepped back. His body tensed up. He was ready to attack at any moment. Everything was calm. The orchid gently swayed in front of him, the wind carrying its fragrance. Yu said in a low voice, "What is it?" "The smell of a contract." The old turtle's voice tightened. "Just now, when Master grabbed it, I felt the power of a contract. As long as you grab the orchid, it will belong to you. Then a contract will be opened. I don't know what the content of the contract is, but it's best if you don't try it." Yu keenly grasped the crux of the matter. "What are you afraid of?" Although the old turtle feared death as the shadow of the abyss, he was destined to possess all sorts of mystical and formidable abilities. Ordinary methods were useless against him. If one didn't have a bit of true ability, then even if they stretched out their head for you to chop it off, you still wouldn't be able to harm the old turtle in the least. This sort of old turtle feared death, but first you had to have the capital to make him afraid. Now, you could feel the fear in the emotions of the old turtle. "I don't dare to hide anything from Master. That smell of a contract just now made me feel a formidable threat. This is why I warned you not to try it. Do not touch anything in this courtyard. For them to appear here, there must be some unspeakable secret." Yu's complexion became increasingly dignified. He couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. He thought back to the two top spirit stone lions outside the door. Luckily, he had been cautious enough not to touch them. Otherwise, things would have been far more troublesome. All right, as he thought, he didn't even need to think about the rewards for clearing the trial. Even if they did exist, there was definitely some poisonous bait hidden somewhere. Since he had determined that this courtyard in front of him wasn't some good place, then no matter how many treasures there were, it was meaningless. Yu decided to leave this place. He tightened his grip on the unconscious Yin and began to search for a way out. The first thing he did was to withdraw from the door. But the passage he had come from had already disappeared. The courtyard was surrounded by a bamboo forest. There was fog in the forest, and the deeper one went, the thicker the fog became until it covered everything. It was like a deep night, so dark that one couldn't even see their fingers. His figure flashed, and Yu rushed into the bamboo forest. The moment he stepped into the fog, his complexion changed. This fog was poisonous, and the most terrifying thing was that it was drawn in by the aura of life. In other words, as long as a living being entered, it would be invaded by the poison. If it were only Yu, then the invasion of the poison wouldn't be too serious a matter for him. But there was still the unconscious Yin behind him. She was already in a bad situation. If the poison invaded her body, the consequences could be imagined. Unless he didn't care about her life or death, he wouldn't be able to enter the fog and search for a way out. Shua! Yu withdrew from the fog. He turned and put down Yin. Her complexion had already turned pale. This was a sign of the invasion of the poison. After expending a great deal of effort, he finally dispelled the poison. Then, he carried Yin on his back and turned to look at the wide, open courtyard entrance. He could only go in and think of a way out. After spending an entire day, Yu walked around the entire courtyard. As he expected, there were treasures everywhere. He could casually grab them with his eyes closed. But no matter how many treasures there were, with the warning of the old turtle, Yu wouldn't touch them at all. But when good things were near his mouth and the taste was tempting, he could only forcefully endure it. That sort of feeling wasn't pleasant at all. The only thing that comforted Yu was that this courtyard was very safe. there really wasn't any danger. At the very least, he didn't encounter any trouble after making his way around. But Chinyu didn't discover any way out. The entire courtyard only had a single entrance, the main entrance. Let alone side doors or back doors, there wasn't even a dog hole. He returned to the entrance. Looking at the courtyard entrance, Chinyu revealed a thoughtful expression. This massive courtyard was filled with countless treasures. It was impossible that it was prepared for him alone. On that day in front of the mountain, those cultivators that wanted to kill him should have already entered the maze. Chinyu's eyes brightened. Perhaps the only thing he could do now was wait. Wait for other cultivators to come here. With the warning of the old turtle, he discovered that these treasures contained contract fluctuations. Thus, he was able to barely resist the greed that rose from the depths of his heart. The cultivators that came later might not be able to do so. As long as they moved, there would inevitably be changes to the things in this courtyard. Perhaps at that time, he would be able to find a way to leave this place. Closing the doors, Chinyu used half a day to erase all traces he left behind after entering the courtyard. Then, he pushed open a wooden shed in the backyard. After closing the door, he brought Yinshi to hide behind a pile of firewood. Chinyu had come here before and carefully examined it. Compared to other places, this place was considered very barren. Besides the pile of wood in the courtyard, there were also some scattered flowers and plants. Their value wasn't even worth a single piece of land. Even if someone came here, they wouldn't be interested in this wooden shed. Chinyu put down Yinshi and carefully prepared himself. With the point of his finger, faint fluctuations spread out and the two's auras vanished from sight. He sat down cross-legged and looked outside. He muttered, "I hope someone comes soon." Chapter 1187. The cultivators behind him were slower than Chinyu expected. After waiting for 2 days, no one arrived. However, it wasn't as if he didn't have any harvests in these 2 days. Staring at a blue brick on the ground, Chinyu frowned, a bit of surprise in his eyes. He never thought that hiding in such a place would result in an unexpected harvest. Of course, Chinyu didn't know what it was exactly, but there was definitely something underneath this blue brick. Because it was actually empty. If it weren't for Chinyu choosing this firewood room, hiding in this pile of firewood, and then stepping on this brick, that's right, it would have been such a coincidence. Whether it was looking at it with the naked eye or sensing it with divine sense, there were no flaws. But the sound of his feet stepping on it was different. In such a strange courtyard, countless treasures were contaminated with the smell of a contract that even the old turtle dreaded. Chinyu was certainly aware that he couldn't touch anything. But he was really curious as to what was hidden underneath this brick. He had the old turtle carefully inspect it. There was no problem with the brick itself. Chinyu hesitated again and clenched his teeth. He easily picked up the brick. It was heavier than he imagined. He carefully shook it a few times, and there was a crashing sound. It was inside the brick. "Master, be careful. You must be careful." The old turtle was nervous. He had already cursed Chinyu several hundred times in his heart. How old was he? Why was he still so curious? Didn't he know that this thing could easily kill someone? He was speechless. Couldn't he just live a good life? Chinyu took a deep breath. He exerted a bit of force with his fingers. With a light cracking sound, the brick broke into several pieces. A ball fell out. It looked like a lump of iron that had been buried underground for countless years. The surface was heavily rusted, a dark red mixed with a deep yellow rust color. "Have you checked it?" "Master, I've checked it 8 times. There really isn't the smell of contract on it." The good news was that this thing was different from the other treasures in the courtyard. It wasn't contaminated with that unknown and terrifying contract. Chinyu took it in his hand. His first thought was that this thing didn't seem heavy. No wonder the brick was so heavy. Then he thought it was ordinary. There was no reaction at all. It was like a real rusted lump of iron. But that didn't make sense. Who would be so bored as to treat a lump of iron as a treasure and hide it in the floor tiles of the woodshed? No matter which story it was in, this was the rhythm of the big baby's appearance. It couldn't be that simple. Chinyu tried to pour magic power into it, but it was like a clay ox sinking into the sea. There wasn't even the slightest bit of movement. This result caused Qin Yu's eyes to brighten. There really was a problem. If it was really just an ordinary lump of iron, it would have been smashed into pieces by his magic power. The fact that it could absorb magic power meant that there was a universe within it. Furthermore, the way it ate without revealing anything was definitely not ordinary. Qin Yu held in his hand and constantly poured magic power into it. At the start, he was a bit worried that it wouldn't be able to withstand it, so he deliberately controlled the speed. However, as time passed and it absorbed an unknown amount of magic power, the metal lump was still the same metal lump. There was no change at all. What else was there to say? He stretched out his arms and poured his magic power into it, as if his life depended on it. He didn't believe that it was a bottomless pit. 2 hours passed. 4 hours passed. 6 hours, there was still a bit left. Qin Yu opened his eyes. His complexion was pale, and beads of sweat covered his forehead. He still had magic power in his body, but less than half of it remained. In this courtyard, he didn't dare to allow himself to fall into a weakened state. Looking at the iron lump that was still maintaining its true self, Qin Yu felt a headache coming on. With his current cultivation, the thickness of his magic power far surpassed that of an ordinary divine stepmaster. Even though he had thrown in half of it, there wasn't even a ripple. However, the more this happened, the more it proved that this lump of iron wasn't ordinary. The plot didn't lie. This was the big baby that had made its grand entrance. Restore magic power. At this time, Qin Yu couldn't help but think back to the 2 top-grade spirit stone lions outside the entrance to the courtyard. If they were here, he wouldn't need to go through so much trouble. He could just hug them and absorb them for a while and restore his magic power. With great difficulty, his magic power was restored. Then, he picked up the iron lump and continued. But even when Qin Yu's magic power fell below half, there still wasn't any change. Then, he began to restore his magic power once more. He missed the lion heads. After going back and forth 7 or 8 times, Qin Yu's entire body froze. He couldn't help but wonder whether or not he was doing something useless. The amount of magic power he was pouring out was enough to blow up an original God Realm Master several times. But there was still no reaction at all. He thought about giving up, but he tossed that thought aside. The tenacity in Qin Yu's bones had been stimulated by the iron lump. He didn't believe that, as a true man who had ventured into the dark abyss, he wouldn't be able to deal with a little thing like this. As Qin Yu gathered his strength and began his battle with the iron lump in the bamboo forest outside the courtyard, a thick fog violently tumbled. A passage condensed in the blink of an eye, leading to the only entrance. Soon, a cultivator flew out. His appearance was miserable. Half of his body was withered, as if all his flesh and blood had been sucked out. One of his arms had also disappeared. The moment he flew out of the passage, he spat out several mouthfuls of blood. But his back remained straight, and a terrifying sword intent surged around him. Heavenly sword sex, high firmament. One arm grasped the sword. His sharp eyes fell on the courtyard in front of him. He didn't relax his guard at all, even if this place didn't seem dangerous. Soon, just like Qin Yu, Ling Zhao's eyes fell on 2 stone lions outside the courtyard. After a moment of thought, he walked over and placed a hand on them. Even with the cold and indifferent nature of a sky-piercer sword cultivator, his complexion changed. His eyes widened as he stared at the stone lions, shock in his eyes. Original God Step Spirit Stone. Strictly speaking, Qin Yu didn't recognize this type of spirit stone and had casually given it the title of a top-grade spirit stone. That was because he was ignorant and inexperienced. In fact, the cultivation world already had a set of standards for spirit stones that surpassed the limits of quality and transformed to another level. They could be used by cultivators at the divine realm and above. The rules were simple. According to the purity and amount of spiritual strength contained in a spirit stone, if it could satisfy the needs of a divine realm cultivator, then it would be at the original God step. As for higher levels, no one had ever seen them. Or, even if they did exist, they were in the hands of the highest existences. An original God-step spirit stone was the highest level that could be found in this world. Of course, its value wasn't low. Looking at all the heavens, an original God cultivator was an absolute powerhouse. They were extremely wealthy, so they wouldn't be stingy when it came to life-saving items. Even with the temperament of a sky-piercer sword cultivator, when he confirmed that the two giant lions in front of him were truly made of original God-step spirit stones, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. It wasn't that he was a good-for-nothing. If it were any other place, even if he saw so many original God-step spirit stones, he wouldn't be so useless. But now, Ling Xiao's strength was nearly exhausted, and he had sustained severe wounds. He could only wait for his death. Coincidentally, he had run into these two guardian lions made of original God-step spirit stones. What else could he say? There was no need to say anything. Since he had hugged them, he would absorb them. It wasn't that Ling Xiao wasn't as cautious as Qin Yu, and it wasn't that he didn't know how to investigate before making a decision. It was that he didn't have the time. If he waited any longer, he didn't know how long he could last. In front of life and death, nothing mattered. Not to mention the fact that he didn't know the situation. Even if he knew it was a poisonous steamed bun, he would eat it first to save his life and then think of another solution. The effect of an original God-step spirit stone was really amazing. After Ling Xiao hugged and sucked for a while, his pale face looked much better. Even half of his shriveled body had recovered a little. If this continued, Ling Xiao would recover in at most one day. It wasn't impossible for him to regrow his broken limbs. However, just as he was sighing inwardly, thinking that after so many misfortunes, he could finally welcome the light, the fog in the bamboo forest rolled again. Another passage had formed. Ling Xiao suddenly opened his eyes. Cold light surged in his eyes, and countless sword shadows were moving. After several breaths, a cultivator flew out with the sound of breaking air. In a flash, this person was like facing a great enemy. Stimulated by the sword intent, his tyrannical aura broke out of his body. When their eyes met, Ling Xiao frowned. He didn't recognize this person. He didn't have much an impression of him before. However, the other's strength wasn't weak. Even in a weakened state, a sword cultivator's keen senses were still there. This was definitely a strong enemy. However, thinking about the news he had heard before the Endless Sea opened, it was understandable that such a hidden expert would appear. Original God-step spirit stone. This cultivator's voice was low and hoarse. His eyes fell on Ling Xiao, revealing a trace of coldness. He could see that Ling Xiao was seriously injured. Right now, he was absolutely in his weakest state. He was a little hesitant, but soon he sighed inwardly. He was too late. If he had come an hour earlier, or even a quarter of an hour, his chances of killing Ling Xiao would have been much higher. As for now, although there was a high chance that he could kill Ling Xiao, there would definitely be risks. After all, with the Heavenly Sword sect's methods, they definitely didn't lack secret techniques to die together with the enemy. It wasn't easy to get out of the maze alive and arrive in front of this mysterious courtyard. It wasn't worth risking his life to fight someone casually. Of course, another important reason was that not far from here, there was another lion made of original God-step spirit stone. This made him feel much more at ease. At the very least, it could be said that everyone had split the rewards here equally. It wasn't shameful to share the gains with Ling Xiao of the Heavenly Sword sect. His figure moved, coming to the side of the lion. His divine sense swept around. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, the mysterious cultivator copied Ling Xiao and threw himself over to protect the lion. He was also injured, but his injuries were much lighter than Ling Xiao's. However, in such a dangerous place, it was best to recover to peak condition. The mysterious cultivator also made a mistake. His carelessness was due to Ling Xiao's previous example. According to his thinking, if Ling Xiao hadn't checked carefully, would he have dared to hug the stone lion and suck it? Well, even if his injuries weren't light and he didn't have time to do so, but after absorbing for so long, he was obviously fine. Then what was there to worry about? Ling Xiao closed his eyes, his tense heart relaxing a little. However, he still didn't dare to be careless. He had seen too many unexpected failures. Right now, the most important thing was to recover from his injuries as soon as possible. As the old saying went, don't say anything, just hug it and suck it with all your might. While Ling Xiao and the mysterious cultivator were racing against time to absorb the spiritual energy, they didn't know that the power of the two contracts had quietly come into effect. One end of the contract was with the two of them, while the other end crossed the endless space, continuously going down and down, submerging into an unknown place. Chapter 1188. Someone had broken into this place. In a wooden hut, Qin Yu looked up towards the entrance. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. There were two people. One of them had a strange aura, but the other was quite familiar. Sky-split sword sex Ling Xiao. Thinking about it, this made sense. Although the labyrinth within the boundary was something that tested one's luck, in a situation where everyone's luck was about the same, strength was the key. With Qin Yu as an example, if he was weak, then let alone coming here, he would have already been cut down by the statue warrior's saber. Although he wasn't sure how the other cultivators had come here, the difference in difficulty shouldn't be too great. Although he couldn't see what was happening outside the courtyard, he could roughly guess from the aura. He sensed that Ling Xiao should be the first cultivator to arrive after him. However, before he entered the courtyard, a second cultivator arrived. The two sides confronted each other for a short period of time before everything calmed down. But for things to calm down, there was a process. It didn't take too long, only several breaths of time. Even so, many things were exposed. Even with the strength of the sky-split sword sex sword cultivator, this strange cultivator actually hesitated for a moment before finally choosing to give up. Then there was only one explanation. Ling Xiao had suffered heavy injuries, and this strange cultivator saw a chance to take advantage of him. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. After the heavily wounded Ling Xiao arrived, he didn't enter the range of the courtyard. Rather, he remained outside. Those two top-grade spirit stone lions. This must be it. He must be borrowing the strength of the spirit stones to recover from his injuries. In other words, the terrifying contract that the old turtle had sensed had most likely been triggered. And this was what Qin Yu was looking forward to seeing. Speaking of this, there was a bit of a sinister and cruel element to it. But the truth was that they weren't familiar with each other and had nearly risked their lives. Towards someone who wanted to kill him, Qin Yu didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. If the sky-split sword sex sword cultivator could use his own tragic fate to find an exit for him to leave, then Qin Yu would be very happy. Since there was one, and then there was a second, it wouldn't be too long before more cultivators arrived. Qin Yu thought for a moment. Then, he turned his attention back to the lump of iron in his hand. He could only wait and see what was happening outside. This would take time. And what he needed to do during this period of time was to figure out just what this lump of iron in his hand was. Now, he didn't need intuition to tell him anything. He was 100% sure that this thing was extraordinary. Nonsense, a normal piece of iron. How could it swallow so much magic power? In the end, Ling Zhao's thoughts of quickly recovering from his injuries came to nothing. It wasn't that the unfamiliar cultivator who was happily sucking on another lion wanted to take action again, but rather that the thick mist in the bamboo forest surged once more. Shwa, shwa. The two of them opened their eyes at the same time. They acted simultaneously, retrieving the original god Great Spirit Stone lion in their arms. The passageways began to condense, and there were actually two. After several breaths of time, two figures flew out from the tunnel at nearly the same time. Ling Xiao, here you are. Wan Jing's eyes brightened, and then he was surprised. He had seen the miserable state of the Tongtian sword cultivators with his own eyes not long ago. Such a serious injury had actually healed quite a bit in such a short period of time. It seemed that he must have gained something. After scanning the surroundings, Ruan Jing's gaze fell on the spot where the guardian lion had been. The color of the ground was clearly different from that of the surroundings. With a single glance, it was clear that something had been taken away. And on the other side of the door, there was another similar mark in a symmetrical position. The cultivator that flew out from the other tunnel slowly said, "It seems that both of you have harvested something." Ling Xiao looked at him. He raised his sword with one arm. "If you want it, then come and take it." This person's complexion changed. He sneered, "Ling Xiao, how much strength do you have left? If Ruan Jing is willing to join forces with me, then you will die without a doubt." The air suddenly froze. Ling Xiao had a calm expression. "Then let's begin." Ruan Jing laughed. "I'm friends with Ling Xiao, and Xiangzhang Academy and the Heavenly Sword Sect have been friends for generations. How could I possibly harm Ling Xiao?" He looked at the cultivator beside him with ill intent in his eyes. "Su Zhu, if you try to sow discord between me and Ling Xiao again, then don't blame me for being impolite. In terms of absolute strength, Skyroaming Temple couldn't compare with Xiangzhang Academy or the Heavenly Sword Sect. But the Su family was an exception. 1,000 years ago, an old ancestor of the Su family who had been in death seclusion had broken through the shackles of his cultivation and reached the sea-crossing realm in a single go. He was revered as a half-saint. Even the various holy lands had to give this newly ascended half-saint enough respect. As a direct descendant, Su Zhu certainly had the confidence to not fear the Heavenly Sword Sect. As long as the half-saint old ancestor was alive, no one would dare target the Su family. But Xiangzhang Academy and the Heavenly Sword Sect each had the shadow of a saint behind them, so they were roughly equal. With a cold sneer, he cursed Ruan Jing inwardly for being useless. No wonder he had always been suppressed in cultivation by the Heavenly Sword Sect all these years. He actually didn't know how to take advantage of such a good opportunity. If he was alone, the risk of dealing with Ling Xiao was far too high. Moreover, it was highly likely that others would take advantage of him, so he couldn't take the risk. There were two things. The one in Ling Xiao's hand was temporarily set aside. If he was interested, then he could only think of another way. It wasn't just Su Zhu who thought this. Ruan Jing also had some ideas. They were far too curious as to just what these two people had obtained. Ling Xiao had suffered heavy injuries. This was something that almost everyone knew. But now, he had the strength to protect himself. This naturally left everyone envious. Of course, besides curiosity and envy, there was also a bit of unwillingness and unwillingness. They had arrived just a moment too late, and the treasure had been taken away. The unfamiliar cultivator noticed this. He frowned, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. "Do you two want to steal it from my hands?" He sneered and took a step forwards. A powerful aura erupted like a volcano, recklessly released. His robes fluttered in the wind, and endless thunder appeared in the depths of his eyes. Rumble, rumble. In the void, thunderclaps rang out one after another. Ruan Jing's complexion changed. "Are you from the Thunder Dominion?" "Yes." The unfamiliar cultivator remained expressionless. This was a bit awkward. In terms of fame, the Thunder Dominion certainly couldn't compare to Xiangzhang Academy or the Heavenly Sword Sect. It was even worse than Skytor Temple. But as long as one knew of the existence of the Thunder Dominion, they wouldn't underestimate it in the slightest. The reason was simple. The master of the Thunder Dominion was a half-saint powerhouse that had lived for an extremely long time. His strength was unfathomably deep. In the past, a saint had broken into the Thunder Dominion and tried to subdue the master of the Thunder Dominion. After a great battle, the saint had left in a rage, but afterwards, the Thunder Dominion was still the Thunder Dominion. After this battle, the master of the Thunder Dominion was recognized as one of the strongest powerhouses beneath the ruler of the universe. He was said to be able to fight a true saint. Ruan Jing smiled and cupped his hands together. "I've long heard that cultivators of the Thunder Dominion cultivate thunder arts and can control the power of thunder. Now that I see you today, you truly live up to your reputation." To him, changing his expression didn't pose any pressure at all, let alone the fact that they hadn't torn apart any pretense of cordiality, Even if they were already badly battered, as long as no one died, he could still turn the situation around. Losing face was inevitable, but this was something that couldn't be eaten or drunk. To offend a Thunder Dominion cultivator for something like that was clearly a stupid choice. Moreover, this Thunder Dominion cultivator was extremely strong. Cough, cough. In the end, everything depended on strength. If this person in front of him was a weak chicken, then, so what if he came from the Thunder Dominion? If he died in the land of Chaos Mystic Realm, then that was because he was weak and had bad luck. He couldn't blame anyone else. Suju lightly coughed. He didn't look at the Thunder Dominion cultivator. Instead, he coldly sneered. What's the situation with this residence? Ling Xiao was expressionless. It was clear he wouldn't answer. If no one answered, then the situation would become awkward. Although it wasn't a big deal to be embarrassed, and it was also good to see Suju lose face. In this situation where they couldn't fight, there was no point in playing these petty tricks. The Thunder Dominion cultivator said, "We only arrived a moment earlier than you two, so we haven't had the time to enter and investigate." She glanced at Ling Xiao. Seeing that he didn't respond, Wan Jing smiled and said, "If that's the case, then the four of us can join forces to investigate this residence. This way we can look out for each other." The Thunder Dominion cultivator smiled insincerely. That's right. Everyone knew how to talk nonsense. If they really encountered danger, then they would fly off on their own, competing to see who could flap their wings faster. You could say you'd help, but if you didn't play dirty and trip them up, you'd be lucky if you kicked them back to block a knife. Of course, this was the case, but since they hadn't completely fallen out with each other, they still had to care about their face on the surface. "Let's go." Ling Xiao expressionlessly walked towards the door. Suju hurriedly followed. Intentionally or unintentionally, he walked very close to Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao glanced at him, coldness flashing in his eyes. Then he calmed down. Wan Jing sneered inwardly. The Su family had risen too quickly, and their eyesight was too shallow. Right now, Ling Xiao looked disheveled and was in the worst condition out of the group. But just because of this, he wanted to treat him as a target that could take a knife for him. Being a target for a knife was a little too naive. The Heavenly Sword sect's methods were always decisive. Either kill your opponent or be killed by others. Be a target for someone else? That didn't exist. Just wait and see. If there were any tricks, the first to cry would be Suju. Wan Jing's thoughts raced. Then he smiled and turned. "Brother Zhou, please." The Thunder Dominion cultivator's face twitched. He thought that his master was right. The scholars of Xiangzhang Academy had the thickest skin of all. Of course, in direct proportion to how thick their skin was, how black-hearted they were, he had to be twice as careful around this boy lest he be schemed against. "Brother Wan, please." The two looked at each other and smiled. There was a sense of closeness between them as they smiled at each other. Standing in front and looking at the tightly shut door, the four people each had a thoughtful look in their eyes. Then they reached out a hand and pushed forward. Just like Qin Yu's previous experience, nothing happened at all. The door quietly opened, revealing a courtyard filled with treasures. "Who?" A gust of wind blew, ruffling the robes of the four people. The air suddenly fell into a strange silence. In all fairness, the four people standing outside all had extraordinary backgrounds. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that their statuses were noble and respected. It was necessary to be experienced and knowledgeable, but even with these two essentials, they still couldn't help but fall into a daze. Treasures, could they also exist in such a manner? The impact that Qin Yu had withstood was like a tsunami in the hearts of the four cultivators, rumbling endlessly. The yellow flower on the rockery was a soul birth flower, right? There was a vine in the corner with small leaves and an unremarkable green color. But if they weren't wrong, this thing was called a soul reaping flower. It shared the same name as the soul reaping flower of the Sly Life clan. Its effect was to suppress soul injuries. No matter how serious the situation was, as long as one ate a section of it, they could ensure that their soul didn't scatter. This was simply a divine, life-saving treasure. There were also the flower beds on both sides of the road. As far as the eye could see, even the smell of grass was enchanting. Treasures. They were all treasures. Suju's eyes turned red, and his breathing became heavy. But right now, the one with the most intense change in mood was the Thunder Dominion cultivator, surnamed Joe. After a moment of shock, he bitterly smiled. If he knew that this courtyard would be like this, he wouldn't have hesitated at all. He would have taken a risk to kill off the Skyren sword cultivator. At that time, all these treasures would have already become his. But there was no medicine for regret in this world. It was already too late to think about these things. Whoosh! There was the cry of sword. The Skyren sword cultivator howled away. He didn't care about the treasures in the courtyard and soon vanished into the depths of the courtyard. Ruan Jing's fingers trembled. He restrained his impulse to attack. He smiled and said, "Ling Xiao has left. Let's discuss how to distribute these things." The Thunder Dominion cultivator said, "Since you and I were able to come here, that means there will be others who will also arrive here. There is no time to delay. You and I will each choose a direction. What we obtain will depend on our luck." No one had any objections. They weren't idiots. It was impossible for them to leave a pile of treasures untouched and decide who was better and who was better first so that other cultivators could take advantage of them. There was no need to say anything else. "Let's begin." Ruan Jing stared at a blade of grass in front of him, a look of hesitation in his eyes. He also felt that this courtyard was filled with treasures was a bit inappropriate. But before he could think any further, he heard movement. The Thunder Dominion cultivator had begun to move. He was extremely fast. He didn't care that his harvesting methods were crude and would damage the treasures themselves. All he wanted was to take away as many things as possible in the shortest time possible. Ruan Jing's heart filled with urgency. Someone would soon arrive. If these treasures were placed here and he didn't take them away, they would be taken by other cultivators. Ruan Jing focused his senses once more, but still couldn't sense anything wrong. He took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. Caution was a virtue. In these past years, it had indeed helped him avoid many dangers. But today, he didn't discover any problems. Perhaps the scene in front of him was too impactful, causing him to become a bit sensitive. Of course, the Thunder Dominion cultivator had already begun to wantonly collect treasures and was still safe and sound. This caused Ruan Jing to feel a little more at ease. He reached out and grasped the grass. A sweet smell entered his nose and dispelled the last bit of hesitation in his eyes. He exerted a bit of strength, and the entire grass was uprooted. A feeling of joy subconsciously gushed out from the depths of his heart. Ruan Jing smiled. Now, this treasure was his. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.